Tonight, we're walking beneath the shadow of Mount Olympus, into a world where the mountains seem taller than memory and the stars hang quietly above the dark Aegean Sea. You follow an ancient road through silver olive groves. Somewhere beyond the trees, waves strike a rocky shore with a slow, repeating rhythm. Cypress branches move in the night wind. The air carries the scent of pine, salt, wood smoke, and olive oil burning inside small clay lamps. Above you rises Olympus. For the ancient Greeks, this is more than a mountain. Behind its mist-covered heights lies the imagined home of the deathless gods, where marble halls gleam beyond mortal sight and sacred fires never entirely fade. And at the centre of that divine household sit two figures whose marriage presents one of Greek mythology's most fascinating contradictions. Zeus, ruler of the sky, and Hera, queen of heaven, husband and wife, brother and sister. How could the goddess who guarded marriage become the wife of her own brother? Why would Zeus, after forming unions with other powerful goddesses, choose Hera as his permanent queen? And why would ancient Greeks, whose ordinary marriage customs were very different, place this sibling union at the centre of Olympus? Tonight, you're going to follow that question backward through divine wars, ancient prophecies, sacred weddings, temple rituals, and memories older than classical Greece itself. Before you continue along the road, you might gently like the video and subscribe if these quiet journeys through the ancient world help you relax. And wherever you are listening tonight, you are welcome to leave your location and local time in the comments, so this journey can be shared beneath many different night skies. Now the road climbs. The stones beneath your feet are cool, moonlight gathers along their edges, while far below, scattered lamps mark sleeping villages. Imagine Olympus as the poets invited their audiences to imagine it. Beyond the clouds, bronze doors open into vast halls, golden light falls across polished floors, ambrosia perfumes the air. Somewhere, a lyre sounds softly. Immortal voices drift between columns while distant thunder rolls beyond the palace walls. Zeus sits upon his throne. In later Greek imagination, you might picture him broad and commanding, holding the thunderbolt that defeated his enemies and established his rule. Beside him sits Hera, crowned and solemn, carrying the dignity of queenship. She's not merely another goddess beside Zeus, she is his queen. Ancient worshippers approached Hera as a powerful divinity associated especially with marriage, women, legitimate union, and the ordered household. Great sanctuaries were dedicated to her, including famous centres at Argos and on Samos. Archaeological remains show that her worship reached deep into Greek religious life, and some researchers believe elements of her cult may preserve traditions older than many surviving literary accounts. That makes the marriage stranger, because the poets also remembered Hera as Zeus's sibling. Both are children of Cronus and Rhea. Their brothers include Poseidon and Hades. Their sisters include Demeter and Hestia. They belong to the same divine generation, born from the same troubled household. Yet you should resist applying ordinary human expectations too quickly. The gods inhabit a different symbolic world. Greek divine genealogy is filled with relationships that would be forbidden, disturbing, or impossible among ordinary mortals. The earliest gods emerge from primordial beings who produce children from themselves or unite with close relatives. Gaia joins with Uranus, Titans marry Titans. Cronus takes his sister Rhea as his wife. Zeus and Hera inherit this older pattern. For the gods, family is not merely family. Family is the architecture of the cosmos. Sky, earth, sea, fertility, death, law, marriage, war, and wisdom are given personalities and woven together through genealogy. When divine beings marry, their union can describe how forces of existence belong together. And Zeus has a problem that thunder cannot solve. He can defeat enemies. He can rule the sky. But conquest alone does not create a stable universe. A king requires legitimacy. A household requires order. A dynasty requires continuity. and beside the ruler of Olympus stands the goddess who embodies the sacred institution capable of binding those things together. Marriage! This is one reason the question of Hera matters. Zeus does not simply marry his sister, he marries the goddess of marriage. And Hera does not simply become the wife of Zeus, she becomes queen of a cosmic household whose relationships mirror, distort, and magnify the anxieties of human society below. Still, another interpretation survives. Perhaps Hera was not always imagined primarily through her relationship with Zeus. Her enormous religious importance has led historians to debate whether some traditions surrounding her preserve an earlier, partly independent goddess whose cult was eventually woven into the Olympian system. The surviving evidence cannot give you one simple answer. Myth rarely does, but tonight, as the wind moves through the mountain mist, you can imagine an older memory lingering beneath the familiar stories. Two powerful divine traditions meeting. Two claims to sacred authority becoming one marriage. Two gods placed upon neighbouring thrones because the cosmos itself needed both. And somewhere behind them waits a warning, long before Zeus ever courts Hera. Their father Cronus has already heard a prophecy. One of his own children will overthrow him. The prediction terrifies him so completely that he turns against his own family, trying to prevent the future by consuming the children who might one day replace him. Among those children is Hera, and among them is Zeus. So before they can become husband and wife, before marble temples rise in their names, before mortals sacrifice beneath their statues, you must enter the darkness of the generation before Olympus. You must meet the father who feared his children, and discover why. In the divine families of Greek myth, blood could mean love, rivalry, inheritance, danger, and destiny all at once. Above you, thunder moves softly across the distant mountains. Perhaps it is only a storm, or perhaps, as an ancient listener might have wondered, the old prophecy is beginning to speak. You move deeper into the darkness that existed before Zeus ruled the sky, before Hera wore the crown of heaven, before the halls of Olympus became the imagined centre of divine order. The road seems older here. The marble temples have vanished, the harbour lamps are gone. Even the familiar names of Greek cities feel distant. You are entering the age of the Titans, when the world of myth is still young, enormous, and unsettled, and when power passes from one generation to another through fear. Above you, the stars shine over a landscape without Olympus as you know it. Mountains rise like sleeping giants. Forests cover valleys where no marketplace has yet formed. Cold streams move through stone. Somewhere in the darkness, the sea breathes against an empty coast, and over this early world rules Cronus. He is the son of Gaia, the earth, and Uranus, the sky. His own rise to power has already been violent. According to the tradition preserved most famously in Hesiod, Uranus hated or feared some of his children and concealed them within Gaia. The earth suffered beneath the burden and called upon her children for help. Cronus answered, with a sickle placed in his hands by Gaia. He attacked his father and ended Uranus's rule. A son replaced a father. For a moment, perhaps, the universe seemed free, but Greek myth rarely allows victory to remain simple. Before the fallen Uranus disappears from the story, a warning hangs over the new ruler. Cronus will not escape the pattern he has created. His own child will overthrow him. You have heard the echo of this warning already. Now you can feel its weight. Imagine Cronus sitting beneath a star-filled sky, ruler of a world he has taken by force. Perhaps the wind moves through ancient trees around him. Perhaps sacred fire burns somewhere nearby. He possesses what he wanted. Yet possession brings no peace. Every future child becomes a possible enemy. Every birth becomes a countdown. Beside him stands Rhea, his sister and wife. That relationship matters. Long before Zeus marries Hera, the divine generation before them already contains the same pattern. Cronus and Rhea are siblings, both children of Gaia and Uranus, and their union produces the gods who will eventually dominate Greek religion. To an ancient storyteller, This is not presented as an ordinary human marriage. These are cosmic beings belonging to a small primordial family. Their relationships keep divine powers within a single genealogy, binding generations of the universe together. But for Rhea, genealogy soon becomes grief. Her first child is born, Hestia. You might imagine Rhea holding the newborn goddess while firelight trembles across the walls of some primordial palace that exists more in poetic imagination than geography. Cronus remembers the prophecy, and he swallows the child. Then comes Demeter. She too disappears. Hera follows. Then Hades. Then Poseidon. One by one, the children of Rhea are taken from her. The surviving literature gives you the terrible action without dwelling upon every private moment. So imagination must walk carefully around the silence. But ancient listeners knew what the pattern meant. Cronus is attempting to stop succession itself. He wants to freeze history. No younger generation must rise. No child must inherit. No prophecy must become true. And yet each attempt to prevent destiny only brings him closer to it. This is one of the quiet patterns that will follow Zeus throughout his own reign. The king who eventually defeats Cronus will inherit not only the throne, but the fear attached to it. Zeus too will hear warnings about dangerous children. Zeus too will discover that sovereignty and anxiety often sit together. For now, however, Zeus has not yet been born. Hera has, and she is inside Cronus. Later mythology gives many details about Hera's personality, her pride, anger, authority, and devotion to the dignity of marriage. Yet here, at the beginning, she's almost silent. That silence creates a mystery. What does it mean for the future goddess of marriage to be born from a marriage poisoned by fear? The household of Cronus and Rhea is united by blood but destroyed by distrust. Husband turns against children. Wife is forced into secrecy. Parenthood becomes political danger. Hera's entire divine identity will eventually stand against this disorder. Marriage, in her later sphere, is supposed to create recognized bonds. Birth should continue the household. Children should inherit their place within society. The family should provide structure. Cronus transforms every one of those ideas into terror. Perhaps that contrast is accidental, created slowly through centuries of storytelling, or perhaps ancient audiences sense something deeper. The goddess who would protect marriage emerges from the ruins of a broken divine family. Rhea finally reaches the limit of endurance. She is pregnant again. This time, the child is Zeus. The old prophecy seems to move through the world once more. Ancient traditions differ in their geographical details, especially when later communities connected Zeus's infancy with particular sacred landscapes. Crete became especially important in the story. Caves, mountains, and local ritual traditions were woven into memories of the hidden divine child. You can picture Rhea traveling beneath darkness. Sea wind crosses the island, mountain mist clings to the slopes, the smell of wet stone and wild herbs fills the cold air. Somewhere above, clouds cover the moon. She seeks a place where Cronus cannot find the newborn. When Zeus arrives, he is hidden, instead of surrendering the child. Rhea wraps a stone in swaddling cloth and presents it to Cronus. The ruler who fears destiny takes the bundle. He swallows it, and for the first time, one of his children remains beyond his reach. Some traditions surround the hidden Zeus with the curettes, armed attendants whose clashing shields conceal the infant's cries. You can almost hear the bronze ringing through the mountain air, echoing against the walls of a Cretan cave. The sound becomes protection, a divine secret guarded by noise. Meanwhile, Hera remains trapped with the others, waiting without knowing that somewhere beyond Cronus's fear, her youngest brother is growing, a child hidden from his father, a future king concealed in stone and shadow. And the prophecy Cronus has spent years trying to silence is now breathing in the darkness. One day Zeus will return. When he does, he will not return alone. He will force open the imprisoned generation, bringing Hera back into the world and beginning a relationship between brother and sister that will eventually reshape Olympus. But first, The hidden child must grow powerful enough to confront the father who swallowed heaven's future, and somewhere within that future waits a queen who has not yet seen her throne. You remain in that older world, where the future gods of Olympus have not yet claimed their shining thrones, and where the great order of Greek mythology is still hidden inside the body of a frightened king. Somewhere on Crete, Zeus grows. You can imagine morning arriving over the mountains in pale bands of gold. Mist lies between dark ridges. Goats move across rocky slopes scented with thyme and wild herbs. From a hidden cave comes the quiet sound of water falling onto stone. While beyond the island, the Aegean stretches toward a horizon bright with sunlight, Cronus believes his youngest child is gone. That mistake gives destiny time. The surviving traditions do not provide a single uninterrupted account of Zeus's childhood. Different communities told different stories about where he was raised, who protected him, and how he was fed. Some remembered the goat Amalthea. Others emphasized nymphs or divine attendants. Archaeology shows that caves and mountain sanctuaries could become powerful places of worship in the Greek world, and later traditions connected Zeus especially strongly with sacred Cretan landscapes. But wherever you imagine him growing, one fact remains. Zeus is free. Hera is not. She exists with Hestia, Demeter, Hades, and Poseidon inside the strange mythic imprisonment created by Cronus. Greek poetry does not ask you to imagine the physical details too literally. This is the language of myth, where swallowing represents possession as much as violence. Cronus has taken the next generation into himself, trying to prevent time from moving beyond him. Yet Hera cannot remain there forever. You already know the prophecy. A child of Cronus will overthrow him, and now that child has survived. As Zeus approaches maturity, the hidden life on Crete gives way to a larger purpose. The future ruler cannot simply remain safe among caves and mountains. He must return to the divine household from which he escaped. Here another powerful female figure enters the story, Metis. Her name is associated with wisdom, cunning intelligence, and practical strategy. In Hesiod's account, she becomes important in the overthrow of Cronus, and later she will become Zeus's first wife. That future relationship will carry its own terrible prophecy. But for now, she represents something Zeus will need throughout his rise. Not strength alone. Cunning. A thunderbolt may defeat an enemy once battle begins, but Cronus must first be made vulnerable. Traditions vary over exactly how this happens. In one familiar version, Cronus is given a substance that causes him to disgorge what he swallowed. Other tellings arrange the details differently, reminding you that Greek mythology was never a single fixed book handed unchanged from generation to generation. Stories moved, singers reshaped them, sanctuaries preserved local memories, families heard one version while travelers carried another across the sea. But all roads lead toward the same extraordinary moment. Cronus releases his children. You can imagine the silence before it happens. A sacred fire crackles. The air feels strangely cold. Perhaps Cronus looks toward the flames and remembers the warning spoken years before. Perhaps for an instant he understands that destiny has not disappeared. Then the imprisoned generation returns. Poseidon, Hades, Demeter, Hestia, and Hera. The future queen of Olympus emerges into a world where her youngest brother now stands grown before her. It is one of those moments Greek mythology leaves almost entirely unexplored. What does Hera think when she first truly encounters Zeus? Does she recognize him immediately as family? Does she know that he is the child their mother saved? Does she feel gratitude because his survival has made her freedom possible? Or does she already sense the overwhelming ambition of the god who will soon claim the sky? No surviving tradition can give you her private thoughts. That silence is important. Later poets will make Hera one of the most vivid personalities on Olympus. She argues, she plans, she resists. She remembers injuries for years. She understands status and humiliation with painful clarity. Yet at this beginning, she stands almost without a voice. So you watch instead. Perhaps torchlight catches her face as she looks at Zeus, the brother she never grew up beside. the brother whose freedom depended upon their mother's deception, the brother around whom an old prophecy has been turning since before his birth. And Zeus, looking back, does not yet see merely a future wife. First he sees a sister returned from captivity, one member of the generation he intends to lead. Freedom, however, does not mean peace. Cronus still rules. Around him stand the Titans, ancient powers who will not simply surrender because a prophecy has begun to unfold. Zeus and his restored siblings have escaped one prison only to enter a struggle for the cosmos itself. The warning that once belonged to Cronus now spreads across heaven. The younger gods are coming. Storm clouds gather over distant mountains, sea winds strengthen along the rocky coast. Somewhere, perhaps in the imagination of an ancient singer beside a winter fire, thunder sounds for the first time like a weapon waiting to be claimed. Hera watches her brother prepare for war. This matters because their later marriage will grow from the world that war creates. Zeus will not inherit an established kingdom peacefully. He will build his authority through alliance, strategy, violence, and the support of his divine siblings. Hera will belong to that victorious generation, not as an outsider brought into the dynasty afterward, but as someone whose fate has been bound to the same prophecy from the beginning. Both are children of Cronus. Both survive his fear. Both will inhabit the new order created after his fall, and perhaps this shared origin explains something about the strange strength of their later bond. Their marriage will be filled with quarrels, betrayals, anger, and resistance. But neither Zeus nor Hera can erase the history that came before it. They come from the same darkness. They are survivors of the same father. They carry the same divine blood into the new age. Yet another uncertainty waits beyond the approaching war. When Cronus falls, who will rule? Zeus may be the child named by destiny, but Poseidon is powerful, Hades is formidable, Hera possesses royal dignity of her own. The overthrow of one king does not automatically determine the shape of the world afterward. The prophecy promises revolution. It does not promise harmony. As you stand beneath the gathering clouds, the first drops of rain touch the warm stone around you. Far away, lightning crosses the horizon. The hidden child of Crete has returned. The swallowed gods are free. And soon Hera will watch Zeus transform from the brother who released his family into the warrior who intends to become king of heaven. You follow Hera into a world preparing for war. The rain that began softly over the mountains has passed, leaving the stones dark and shining beneath a pale morning sky. Mist drifts through the valleys. Pine branches release the scent of water and resin, and somewhere far below, unseen waves break against the coast. The younger gods are free, but freedom has given them something dangerous, a future. Cronus still holds power, and the Titans remain the older generation of the cosmos. Zeus has fulfilled only the first movement of the prophecy. He has survived his father and restored his siblings. Now he must accomplish what Cronus has feared from the beginning. He must replace him. The struggle that follows becomes known as the Titanomachy, the war between the Titans and the younger gods who will eventually rule from Olympus. Hesiod remembers it as a conflict lasting 10 years. You can imagine how enormous 10 divine years might have felt to an ancient audience gathered around a fire. Seasons passing, forests growing and burning, snow gathering on mountains and disappearing again. Generations of mortals perhaps living beneath a sky shaken by powers they cannot understand. Across the landscape stand two great centres of resistance. The Titans are associated with Mount Othrys. Zeus and his allies fight from Olympus. Between them lies a world waiting to discover who will govern it. Yet Zeus does not enter this struggle alone. That is important. Later stories often place him at the centre of divine authority, Thunderbolt raised, commanding gods and mortals. But before he can become king, he must learn the art of alliance. The siblings Cronus tried to erase now become part of the force that destroys him. Poseidon brings the violence of the sea. Hades carries the shadowed power that will later belong to the underworld. Demeter, Hestia, and Hera stand within the younger divine generation whose survival proves Cronus has already failed. The literature gives far more attention to Zeus's battlefield deeds than to Hera's role in the Titanomachy, leaving another uncertainty in the mist. How actively did early traditions imagine her participating? Did some lost oral stories give her a larger place? Or was her later authority understood as emerging mainly after Zeus had established the new order? You cannot know. But you can picture her watching the horizon as the first distant flashes illuminate the clouds. She has already experienced what happens when a ruler allows fear to consume his household. Now her brother is gathering power, and the question must remain somewhere in the silence. Will Zeus be different? Before that question can be answered, Zeus needs allies beyond his siblings. Gaia gives him counsel. Deep beneath the earth, Cronus has imprisoned beings whose strength could alter the war, the Cyclops and the 100-handers. Zeus releases them, turning another act of liberation into an alliance. And the Cyclops offer gifts. To Poseidon comes the trident. To Hades comes the famous helmet associated with invisibility. To Zeus comes thunder. You stand beneath a darkened sky as the weapon enters his hands. The Greeks lived in a landscape where storms could feel intensely personal. Thunder rolled through mountain valleys. Lightning struck exposed peaks, trees, and buildings. A clear afternoon could become violent beneath gathering clouds. Zeus's thunderbolt transformed that terrifying natural force into the visible expression of divine sovereignty. But here, before sovereignty, it is a weapon of rebellion. A divine sign appears in the heavens. Lightning forks above Olympus. Perhaps those watching understand it as an omen. The child Cronus failed to swallow now carries the sky's most terrible fire. The war intensifies. Hesiod's poetry imagines the earth roaring, the heavens trembling, and the sea boiling beneath the violence. The sound of battle seems to reach even the depths of Tartarus. Yet you need not hurry through it. You can stand far from the battlefield, perhaps on a ridge beside Hera, and experience the war as distant flashes through cloud. Thunder, then silence, a glow beyond the mountains, then another impact, low enough to vibrate beneath your feet. Ash settles on leaves. The wind tastes faintly of smoke. For Hera, every victory carries a strange implication. If Zeus wins, her brother will become something more than the youngest child of Rhea. He will become the center of a new political universe. The balance among the siblings will change, and Zeus himself will change with it. The 100-handers finally help overwhelm the Titans, hurling stones with impossible force. Cronus and many of his allies are defeated and cast into Tartarus, guarded within the deep structure of the cosmos they once ruled. The prophecy has completed its circle. Cronus overthrew Uranus. Zeus overthrows Cronus. A son has replaced his father again. But victory contains a warning. You have seen this pattern before. If fathers can be overthrown by sons, why should Zeus believe the pattern ends with him? This fear will eventually lead him toward another prophecy, one concerning Metis and the possibility of a child stronger than its father. The ruler who defeated Cronus will discover that the throne carries the same shadow that haunted the ruler before him. For now, the battlefield grows quiet. Clouds open above the mountains. Morning sunlight falls through them in long golden columns. The air smells of rain, broken earth, and smoke. Rivers continue toward the sea. Forests stand battered but alive. The world has survived the war of generations, and Hera stands among the victors. Perhaps she remembers Cronus. Perhaps she remembers the darkness. Perhaps she looks towards Zeus and recognizes that the brother who helped free her has become the most powerful figure among the younger gods. Ancient audiences knew what followed. The victors must divide the cosmos. The sea will need its ruler. The dead will need theirs. The sky must belong to someone, and Olympus must become more than a military stronghold. It must become a court, a household, a center of law and divine hierarchy. Zeus has learned how to conquer. Soon he must learn how to reign. That is where Hera's importance begins to deepen, because thunder can silence an enemy, but it cannot create a marriage. Lightning can destroy a rival, but it cannot establish a royal household. The new king will need relationships, alliances, descendants, and legitimacy. He will need an order strong enough to survive the ancient curse of one generation replacing another. As evening settles over the exhausted mountains, you see one final flash beyond Olympus. No battle follows it, only thunder rolling slowly toward the sea. The prophecy has been fulfilled, but perhaps another warning has already begun. The ruler of heaven has inherited the fear of being replaced, and somewhere beside him stands the sister who will eventually become the queen his new cosmos requires. You remain among the mountains after the thunder has faded, standing at the edge of a world that has survived its first great war of succession. Morning comes quietly. Mist rests over the valleys beneath Olympus. Rainwater gathers in hollows between stones. Far away, the Aegean catches the first light, turning from deep blue to silver, while birds begin calling from pine-covered slopes. After 10 years of divine conflict, even ordinary sounds seem strangely precious. Cronus has fallen. The Titans who resisted Zeus have been defeated, and the prophecy that haunted the old ruler has finally been fulfilled. Yet victory has created a question almost as dangerous as the war itself. Who rules what remains? Zeus has led the rebellion, but Poseidon and Hades are not servants. They are his brothers, children of Cronus and Rhea, members of the same generation that endured their father's fear. Each possesses immense divine authority. According to the tradition preserved in the Iliad, the three brothers divide their great realms by lot. You can imagine the moment beneath a clear sky. Perhaps stones or tokens rest inside a bronze vessel. Perhaps the gods gather round while a sacred fire burns nearby. The exact ritual is not described for you in detail, and ancient audiences may have imagined it differently, but the meaning is unmistakable. Chance, destiny, and divine order meet. Poseidon receives the sea. Hades receives the shadowed realm of the dead. Zeus receives the sky. The earth and Olympus remain shared. For an ancient Greek listening to this story near a harbour, the division would have described a familiar world in divine terms. Above is the unpredictable sky of Zeus. Beyond the harbour wall is Poseidon's sea, capable of carrying merchants safely or destroying ships against stone. Beneath every road and field lies the eventual kingdom of Hades. The cosmos has become structured, but Olympus still needs structure of its own. You climb higher. The imagined palace of the gods begins to emerge through white mountain mist. Bronze doors stand beneath towering columns. Sacred fires burn without consuming their fuel. The scent of ambrosia drifts through halls where the victorious generation gathers. Zeus now occupies the highest throne. Yet his victory does not make him secure. The warning that destroyed Cronus remains alive in memory. A son can replace a father. A younger power can overthrow an older one. No throne is protected merely because its ruler believes it should be. Zeus therefore begins constructing something Cronus never successfully possessed: a network of divine relationships. He distributes honors. He recognizes spheres of authority. He allows other gods to possess meaningful places within the new order. Some researchers see in these myths a reflection of how Greek communities imagined good kingship. A ruler was powerful, certainly, but authority also depended upon maintaining relationships among households, aristocratic families, sanctuaries, and communities. A king surrounded only by enemies could not remain king for long. Zeus's cosmos becomes political, and marriage will become part of that politics, before Hera becomes his permanent queen. Ancient genealogy associates Zeus with a series of divine unions. These are not random episodes placed around his biography. Each partner brings something into the developing Olympian order: wisdom, justice, memory, grace, fertility. Zeus seems almost to gather the qualities necessary for stable sovereignty through relationship. And among the earliest of those relationships waits Metis. You have already encountered her. She is the cunning intelligence associated with the strategy that helped defeat Cronus. In Hesiod's genealogy, she becomes Zeus's first wife. But a warning follows her. A prophecy says that Metis will bear extraordinary children. First, a daughter of immense wisdom. Then, according to the threat Zeus hears, a son destined to become ruler of gods and men. The old fear returns. For a moment, Zeus stands exactly where Cronus once stood, a ruler, a prophecy, an unborn child, a throne that may someday belong to someone else. The memory of the swallowed generation seems to move through Olympus like a cold wind. What will Zeus do? That answer still waits ahead. For now, Hera watches the new world forming around her. She too receives divine identity and authority. Later Greek worship will know her as a great goddess of marriage and queenship, honoured at sanctuaries whose remains archaeologists still study. At Argos, her cult would become deeply rooted in regional identity. On Samos, worshippers would approach one of the most important sanctuaries associated with her in the ancient Greek world. Such traditions remind you that Hera cannot be understood merely as the jealous wife of later stories. Before she's reduced to that familiar image, she's a goddess capable of receiving monumental temples, sacrifices, festivals, and generations of devotion. And Zeus has not married her yet. That fact matters. The marriage at the centre of Olympus is still in the future. Perhaps Hera walks through the new palace halls while torchlight glows against polished stone. She sees Zeus surrounded by allies and divine partners. She hears the distant sound of Poseidon's waters. She knows Hades has descended into his silent kingdom. Their childhood household has been scattered across creation. Only Olympus can bring the family together again. Yet the family is changing. Zeus is no longer merely her younger brother. He is king. Hera is no longer merely a daughter rescued from Cronus. She is becoming a divine authority whose identity will eventually be bound to marriage itself. Why these two powers ultimately join remains uncertain. One interpretation emphasizes divine genealogy. The ruling couple belongs to the same supreme generation, preserving royal authority within the house of Cronus and Rhea. Another looks toward religious history. Perhaps traditions surrounding Zeus and Hera reflect the gradual joining of cults and communities whose divine figures had once possessed more independent identities. And another possibility is simpler. Greek storytellers needed heaven to resemble a royal household. A king required a queen. Not just any queen, one powerful enough to stand beside the ruler of storms. As twilight gathers around Olympus, sacred fires appear along the imagined palace terraces. Below, the mortal world settles into evening. Fishermen pull boats beyond the tide. Families gather around hearths. Somewhere, a bride offers a prayer before marriage, unaware that the divine protector of her future household is still waiting for her own mythical wedding. Above, Zeus looks across the realm he has won. Thunder murmurs far beyond the horizon. The old prophecy has made him king. But another prophecy, carried through Meti, warns that kingship can still be taken away, and before Hera can become queen of heaven, Zeus must confront the very fear that destroyed their father, the fear of his own descendants. You follow the glow of the sacred fires deeper into the newly ordered halls of Olympus, where Zeus has won the sky but has not yet created the divine household that later generations will know so well. Outside, evening gathers over Greece. Mountain mist moves between dark peaks. The last sunlight touches the Aegean, turning the distant water copper and gold somewhere below. A shepherd leads animals toward shelter, while smoke rises from a village hearth and disappears into the cooling air. Above all of this, Zeus begins learning that ruling is more complicated than victory. The thunderbolt gave him power. It did not give him everything a king required, and so the stories preserved by Hesiod describe a sequence of divine unions before Hera becomes Zeus's lasting queen. To modern ears, the genealogy may sound like a list of marriages and children, but when you walk slowly through it, another pattern appears. Zeus seems to be gathering the qualities of civilization around his throne. First comes Metis. You have already met her in the shadows of Cronus's downfall, the goddess whose name evokes cunning intelligence, practical wisdom, and the ability to perceive what brute strength cannot. She becomes Zeus's first wife in Hesiod's account. For a moment, you might imagine something almost peaceful between them. The war is finished, the Titans are defeated, Olympus stands beneath a clear sky. Metis, whose intelligence helped Zeus rise, now remains close to the ruler she helped create. But then comes the warning. Gaia and Uranus reveal that Metis is destined to bear remarkable children. She will first bear a daughter equal to her father in wisdom and courage. Then she may bear a son, and that son is destined to become king of gods and men. The words reach Zeus like thunder from another sky. You have heard this prophecy before in another form. Cronus heard that one of his children would overthrow him. Cronus responded by swallowing them. Now Zeus hears that a future son may replace him. What will the liberator do when he becomes the threatened king? The answer is unsettling. Zeus swallows Metis. The image is deliberately familiar. The son repeats the father. Yet Zeus alters the pattern. Cronus swallowed children after they were born because he wanted to stop succession. Zeus absorbs Metis while she is pregnant, incorporating both the threatening future and the wisdom she represents into himself. Later, Athena will emerge from Zeus's own head, fully formed and armed. After Hephaestus, or in other traditions, another divine figure opens the suffering god's skull. The daughter arrives, the predicted son does not. Zeus keeps his throne. Whether ancient audiences heard this as clever avoidance of destiny, an act of domination, or a mythic explanation for Zeus possessing wisdom alongside strength, is impossible to reduce to one interpretation. Historians continue to debate how such genealogies developed across generations of oral storytelling, but the warning matters for Hera. The Zeus who will eventually marry her has already learned that marriage can threaten kingship. A wife may carry the future, and the future may overthrow you. After Metis comes Themis. Her presence feels different. Themis embodies divine order, custom, and the principles by which gods and mortals understand what is fitting. Through their union come figures associated with order and destiny, including the Horae and, in Hesiod's genealogy, the Moirae. You can imagine Zeus beside Themis beneath a star-filled sky. No longer merely the warrior who defeated Cronus, but a ruler learning to bind force to law. Then comes Eurynome, associated in Hesiod with the birth of the Charities, the Graces. Brightness enters the divine court. Beauty, charm, the pleasures that soften social life. Demeter follows in the genealogy. And through Zeus and Demeter comes Persephone, whose later descent into the underworld will become one of the great myths connecting fertility, loss, death, and return. Then Mnemosyne, memory. For 9 nights Zeus joins her, and from their union come the Muses. Now song enters the world. History can be remembered. Poetry can preserve the names of heroes. A singer beside a fire centuries later can call upon the Muses and tell stories of Zeus himself. Then Leto, who bears Apollo and Artemis, brings another extraordinary pair into the Olympian generation. One by one, the divine family expands, and Hera watches. The surviving poems do not place you beside her during each of these unions. You do not know what early storytellers imagined her feeling before she became Zeus's wife. Later mythology will make her anger at his relationships famous. But applying that later jealousy backward would tell you more than the sources allow. Still, the pattern creates a mystery. Why Hera? Zeus has already joined with goddesses of wisdom, law, fertility, memory, and grace. Why does none become the permanent queen beside him? Perhaps the answer lies in what Hera represents. She does not merely contribute one quality to Zeus's reign. She embodies the institution that joins households, marriage itself, and she possesses something else, royal equality. Hera is not a lesser divine figure approaching the house of Cronus from outside. She's the daughter of Cronus and Rhea. Born from the same generation as Zeus, she endured the same father's fear. She belongs to the victorious family that replaced the Titans. If Zeus requires a queen who can stand beside him rather than disappear into his growing genealogy, Hera is uniquely placed. But that does not mean she will accept him easily. Later traditions remember resistance. They remember courtship. They remember Zeus approaching Hera not simply as king of the universe, but through deception and transformation. And behind those stories lies another warning. A ruler who commands lightning may discover that there are things thunder cannot obtain. As night settles over Olympus, you can hear wind moving through the columns of the divine palace. Torches bend softly in the draught. Somewhere beyond the walls, an owl calls beneath the stars. Zeus has defeated his father. He has escaped the prophecy of Metis. He has gathered wisdom, order, beauty, memory, fertility, and divine offspring around his throne. Yet one place beside him remains unsettled, the throne of the queen, and somewhere in the quiet halls walks Hera, the sister who survived Cronus with him, carrying an authority that Zeus cannot simply swallow, inherit, or command. Soon, he will turn toward her, and the goddess of marriage will have to decide what the king of heaven means to her. Brother, ruler, suitor, or something far more dangerous than all three. You leave the crowded halls of Olympus for a quieter landscape, where Hera can be imagined before marriage defines so much of the mythology surrounding her. The mountain air is cool here. Cypress trees rise against a fading sky, their dark branches moving gently in the evening wind somewhere below. Water passes over smooth stones. The scent of damp earth mingles with wild herbs, and beyond the hills the sea catches the last pale light of day. Hera walks through this world without Zeus beside her. That image is worth holding for a moment. Later stories so often place her within the orbit of her husband that it becomes easy to forget something ancient worshippers would never have forgotten. Hera is powerful in her own right. Long before you imagine her arguing with Zeus across the halls of Olympus, you can imagine worshippers approaching her sanctuaries with offerings. Women might seek her protection around marriage and childbirth. Communities could honor her with festivals. Cities and regions could connect their identity to her sacred presence. At Argos, Hera would become one of the great divine powers of the landscape. Her famous sanctuary, the Heraion, stood beyond the city amid the hills of the Argive plain, on Samos, across the Aegean near the coast of Asia Minor. And another enormous sanctuary developed around her worship. Archaeological discoveries at these places reveal generations of devotion. Objects offered to the goddess came from near and far, carried through networks of travel and exchange. Pilgrims approached sacred spaces where smoke from sacrifices mingled with incense and the smell of animals, oil, dust, and sea wind. This is not the religious profile of a goddess whose importance depends entirely upon her husband. Some researchers therefore believe Hera may preserve aspects of a very ancient divine tradition whose development cannot be reduced to the familiar literary role of Zeus's wife. How old was her independence? No one can say with certainty. The earliest Greek religious landscape is partly hidden from you, preserved in fragments, archaeology, later poetry, and traditions transformed across centuries, but the uncertainty changes the way you approach the marriage. Perhaps Zeus did not simply choose a sister. Perhaps the mythology gradually brought two enormous forms of sacred authority together, the Sky King and the Great Queen. In myth, however, this union must become personal, and Hera is not always remembered as willing. Later traditions describe Zeus becoming captivated by her and seeking her as his wife. Some accounts suggest that his pursuit lasts for a long time, even centuries in the exaggerated language appropriate to immortal beings. Hera refuses him. You can imagine the scene without needing to make it loud. Zeus approaches through a sacred grove. Sunlight moves between leaves. Cicadas call in the heat. Hera stands near a spring where cold water runs over pale stone. The ruler who defeated Cronus comes toward her, and she says no. Perhaps that refusal surprises you. Zeus possesses the thunderbolt. He rules the heavens. His decisions can move through the entire cosmos. Yet kingship does not automatically give him Hera. Her resistance reveals something important about the goddess she will become. Hera's identity is deeply connected with dignity. Status matters to her, Recognition matters. Marriage matters precisely because it transforms a relationship into something publicly acknowledged and sacred. She is not simply another figure to pass through Zeus's long sequence of divine unions. If Hera joins him, she must become queen. This distinction helps explain why their later conflicts become so bitter. Zeus's affairs do not merely wound affection, they challenge the institution Hera embodies and the status she holds within the Olympian household. But all of that waits ahead. For now, Zeus continues his pursuit. Ancient traditions do not agree on every detail of their courtship. Geography itself becomes part of the uncertainty. Different places claimed connections with their union, preserving local versions in which the divine marriage touched a particular mountain, sanctuary, or landscape. This is how Greek myth lived. A traveller could sail from one island to another and hear familiar gods placed beneath different trees, on different mountains, beside different springs. The gods belonged everywhere, and every community could remember them nearby. Perhaps Hera receives a dream during these days of pursuit. You can imagine her sleeping beneath the roof of a sacred dwelling while moonlight falls across the floor in the dream. 2 thrones stand on Olympus. One is surrounded by lightning. The other remains empty. Between them grows a pomegranate tree, heavy with fruit, while storm clouds gather behind the mountain. Then a voice speaks from somewhere she cannot see. A throne accepted cannot easily be abandoned. Hera wakes before dawn. Was it prophecy, warning, or merely the uneasy imagination of a goddess whose future is beginning to narrow? No surviving ancient text records such a dream exactly. And you should understand it as the kind of omen an ancient storyteller might use to illuminate the choice before her, rather than as a fixed canonical episode. Yet the question it carries is real. What would Hera gain by marrying Zeus? Everything that queenship could offer. And what might she lose? Freedom from the king's desires. Zeus faces his own uncertainty. He has overcome Titans and escaped a prophecy concerning Metis. But Hera's refusal presents a different kind of obstacle. Force may establish rule. It cannot create the sacred legitimacy of marriage. If Hera is to become the goddess whose union with Zeus represents divine kingship, the story requires some form of acceptance. And this is where one of the strangest courtship traditions begins. The weather changes. Clouds gather above the hills. Warm air disappears beneath a sudden cold wind. Leaves turn their pale undersides toward the sky. Thunder sounds in the distance, but this time Zeus does not appear holding the lightning. Instead, according to a famous tradition associated especially with the region around Mount Thornax, later called Cuckoo Mountain, he chooses another form, small, weak, shivering. A cuckoo. You hear the first rain striking leaves. Hera seeks shelter as the storm crosses the landscape. The goddess who refused the king of heaven notices a tiny bird trembling in the cold. It appears helpless. She reaches toward it. Perhaps she remembers nothing of prophecy in that instant. Perhaps she sees only a creature needing warmth. The bird allows itself to be lifted. Hera draws it close against her body, protecting it from the rain. And somewhere behind the eyes of that trembling creature waits Zeus. The king who could not win Hera with sovereignty has approached through vulnerability, or the appearance of vulnerability. That distinction will matter, because when the storm passes, Hera will discover what she is actually holding, and the goddess who could say no will face a decision that changes the structure of Olympus forever. Rain moves across the mountain in long silver curtains. You hear it before you see anything clearly. Drops strike broad leaves, dark stone, and the branches of ancient oaks. Water gathers along the narrow path beneath your feet and runs downhill in twisting streams. The warm afternoon has vanished beneath a cold wind, carrying the smell of wet earth, pine resin, and distant sea salt. Hera stands beneath the shelter of the trees. Against her body trembles a cuckoo. The little bird is soaked. Its feathers cling to its body, and its heartbeat seems almost impossibly quick beneath her hand. A moment earlier she had been alone, waiting for the sudden storm to pass. Then she noticed the creature struggling in the cold and gathered it close. The gesture is simple, protective, almost tender, and that is precisely why the story has endured. Because the bird is Zeus, the king of heaven, who defeated Cronus and commands the thunderbolt, has approached Hera in the form of something powerless. For a few quiet moments she does not know. You can imagine her standing beneath dripping branches while thunder rolls far across the hills. The bird presses closer for warmth. Hera shields it beneath her clothing, and perhaps Zeus recognizes something about the goddess he's been pursuing. She protects what seeks shelter. She values the bond created when one being places itself in another's care. And Zeus is about to violate that trust. The transformation ends. Where the small bird rested, the god reveals himself. Ancient versions differ in tone and detail, and later retellings sometimes make the encounter far more forceful than others. In one influential tradition, Zeus takes advantage of Hera after gaining access to her through the disguise, and Hera, ashamed of what has occurred, agrees to marry him. Other retellings soften the episode into courtship, emphasizing the cuckoo as the clever device by which Zeus finally wins her affection. You stand inside the uncertainty between those versions. It is uncomfortable. It should be. Greek mythology often refuses to make its gods morally simple. Divine power can be beautiful and frightening at once. Zeus protects guests, strangers, oaths, and kingship. Yet the stories repeatedly portray him using disguise and deception in his relationships. The god who establishes order does not always behave according to the order mortals are expected to follow. Hera understands who stands before her now. The storm continues around them. Perhaps lightning briefly illuminates Zeus's face. She has refused him before. Now the ruler of heaven has crossed the boundary of her refusal through transformation. What happens inside Hera cannot be recovered. Ancient poets did not preserve her private thoughts for you, but later mythology suggests that she never becomes a goddess who forgets humiliation easily. Memory will become one of the hidden forces inside their marriage. Every insult accumulates. Every rival matters. Every violation of her position as wife becomes part of a wound that began, perhaps, even before the wedding. Yet another interpretation remains possible. The cuckoo itself may carry older religious meaning. In the Argive region, traditions connected Zeus's courtship of Hera with Mount Thornax, whose name was said to have changed to Mount Cuckoo because Zeus transformed himself there. Coins and artistic traditions also associate Hera with the cuckoo, suggesting that the bird became more than a passing detail in a romantic tale. Perhaps an old local symbol survived inside the courtship myth. Perhaps seasonal associations mattered. Perhaps the cuckoo, whose call can announce changing seasons, carried meanings that later storytellers reshaped into a divine disguise. Historians continue to debate how much ritual, local cult, and poetic invention lies beneath the surviving story. For you, walking through the rain, the bird remains both symbol and warning. Zeus obtained closeness by becoming something he was not. That pattern will return. Again and again, he will transform himself when approaching gods or mortals. Bull, swan, shower of gold. Mortal form, the exact shapes vary across stories, but transformation becomes one of his signatures. Power hides itself. Desire wears another face, and Hera, who will become guardian of marriage, begins her most important marriage beneath the shadow of disguise. The irony is almost painfully Greek, yet the story does not end beneath the trees. Marriage must follow, and marriage in the ancient imagination is not merely private affection between two individuals, it joins households, it establishes legitimacy, it creates recognized relationships and future descendants. For Zeus and Hera, the consequences are cosmic. You follow them from the storm toward the world of sacred union. Clouds slowly break apart above the mountains. The rain weakens. Drops fall from leaves at longer intervals. And somewhere a bird begins calling from the wet forest. Hera has a decision before her. Zeus may desire her, but desire alone cannot give him what her marriage will provide. She is a daughter of Cronus and Rhea. She belongs to his own generation. She possesses royal authority independent of his pursuit, And unlike the earlier divine partners who appear in Zeus's genealogy, Hera will not simply enter the story, bear children, and recede from the central throne. She will remain. That permanence transforms everything. Perhaps the earlier imagined warning returns to her now. A throne accepted cannot easily be abandoned. Before her stands the possibility of becoming Queen of Olympus. Not one lover among many. Not merely another mother of Zeus's children. Queen, but the title carries a price. To become the divine guardian of marriage while married to Zeus will place Hera at the center of a contradiction she can never completely resolve. She will represent fidelity beside a husband famous for violating it. She will protect lawful union beside a god whose desires repeatedly cross its boundaries. She will possess extraordinary status while repeatedly discovering the limits of that status. Perhaps no one, not Hera, not Zeus, not even the gods who watch them can know how much suffering is already contained within the approaching wedding. For now, however, the storm has ended. The western sky opens into gold. Wet stones shine along the path. The scent of crushed herbs rises beneath your feet, and distant clouds move toward the sea. Zeus and Hera leave the grove. Behind them, somewhere among dripping branches, a cuckoo calls to an ancient listener. Perhaps it is merely a bird, or perhaps it is an omen, a reminder that the marriage about to unite the rulers of Olympus begins not with perfect harmony, but with transformation, uncertainty, and a moment beneath a storm that neither husband nor wife will ever truly escape. Ahead, sacred fires are being prepared. The king has found his queen. Now heaven must witness their wedding. You leave the rain-darkened grove behind and follow Zeus and Hera toward one of the most important moments in the imagined history of Olympus. The storm has passed completely now. Evening light spreads across the mountains, touching wet leaves with gold. Water still falls from branches in slow drops, but the air has become warmer, far below. The sea reflects a narrow band of crimson sky, and from somewhere among the trees comes the quiet call of the cuckoo. Soon even that sound fades. Ahead, sacred fires are burning. The marriage of Zeus and Hera is not remembered through one single story accepted everywhere in Greece. Different communities preserve different locations, rituals, and traditions surrounding the divine wedding. Some placed important memories in the Argolid, others connected the marriage with Euboea, Samos, or other sacred landscapes. Myth travelled with worshippers, sailors, poets, and generations of families, gathering local details as it moved. Yet beneath those variations lies one powerful idea. Heaven requires a wedding. You enter the celebration as though approaching an ancient sanctuary at dusk. Torches line the path, their flames bend gently beneath the mountain breeze. Laurel and olive branches decorate the way, and the scent of incense drifts through the cool air. Somewhere, strings are being touched softly. Voices rise and fall beyond the columns. Hera approaches the divine gathering. She is no longer the goddess sheltering a cuckoo from rain. She comes as a daughter of Cronus and Rhea, sister of the victorious Olympian generation, and a divine power whose authority cannot be separated from the marriage now being created. Beside her stands Zeus. The thunderbolt is absent from his hand. Tonight he is not conqueror. He is bridegroom. Ancient traditions sometimes imagine the wedding with extraordinary abundance. One famous story tells how Gaia gives Hera a wondrous tree bearing golden apples, later guarded in the distant garden of the Hesperides. Whether every detail belonged originally to the same wedding tradition is difficult to know. Greek myth accumulated layers across centuries, and storytellers often connected sacred objects to larger divine events. Still, the image is fitting. Earth herself offers fruit to the marriage. Golden apples glow among dark leaves. Fertility, abundance, and permanence surround the bride. You can almost smell crushed flowers beneath your feet. For ancient Greek audiences, weddings were moments of transformation. A bride left one household and entered another. Songs, gifts, procession, sacrifice, and feast could publicly recognize the change. The details varied across regions and centuries. But marriage was not merely a private declaration of affection. It altered relationships between families. And this wedding alters the relationships of heaven. Zeus already possesses sovereignty. Hera gives that sovereignty a queen. Their shared ancestry strengthens the symbolism. Both descend from Cronus and Rhea. Neither enters the ruling generation from outside. The two children of the defeated dynasty now occupy the highest paired positions in the dynasty that replaced it. The pattern resembles their parents. Cronus married Rhea, Zeus marries Hera, brother and sister stand together again. But the younger pair must somehow avoid repeating the destruction of the older one. Perhaps that is the first warning hidden inside the celebration. You remember what happened in Cronus's household. Fear entered marriage. Children became threats. A husband turned against his own family. Rhea deceived him to save Zeus. Now Zeus and Hera stand beneath wedding torches carrying the inheritance of that broken household with them. Can the children of such a marriage create a better one? No one celebrating tonight can know. The feast begins. You imagine golden vessels catching the firelight. Nectar is poured. Ambrosia fills the divine tables. Music travels through halls that seem to float above the clouds. Beyond Olympus, mortal Greece lies beneath the stars. Ships rock gently inside harbours. Waves strike stone walls with hollow sounds. Oil lamps burn inside houses where families share evening meals. Somewhere a young woman preparing for her own marriage may whisper Hera's name, asking the goddess for protection. This is the strange beauty of the divine wedding. It becomes greater than the personalities involved, even if Zeus and Hera quarrel. Even if their relationship becomes painful, the union represents something ancient worshippers considered fundamental to human society. The ordered household, recognized partnership, legitimate descent, continuity between generations. Hera's authority over marriage does not require her own marriage to be emotionally perfect. In fact, the myths may have felt more meaningful because it was not. Human marriages also contained tension. Hierarchy, jealousy, childbirth, inheritance, separation, reconciliation, and obligations larger than individual desire. The gods magnified those realities, and Zeus and Hera magnified them more than anyone. Night deepens. Perhaps the divine couple withdraws from the feast toward a chamber prepared beyond the palace halls. Here another ancient tradition enters the story. Homer's Iliad remembers Zeus recalling how he and Hera once came together secretly in desire, hidden from their parents, elsewhere. Traditions place the sacred marriage in different landscapes and circumstances. The versions do not fit perfectly. They were never required to. Ancient myth could preserve several memories at once. One community might emphasize courtship, another ritual union, another divine passion, another the political dignity of Hera as queen. What mattered was not producing a single biography of Zeus and Hera. What mattered was expressing what their union meant. Outside, clouds gather again around Olympus. Not a violent storm, only distant flashes beyond the horizon. Hera notices them. Perhaps Zeus does too. The sacred fire between them crackles as wind moves through the columns. Then something strange happens. One flame divides briefly into two, for a heartbeat. Two tongues of fire rise side by side from the same altar. Then one bends away. An ancient priest might have called it an omen. Two rulers sharing one household, two powers joined, yet never entirely merged. You cannot know whether the sign promises harmony or conflict. That uncertainty belongs to everything ahead. For tonight, Hera sits beside Zeus. Queen beside king, sister beside brother, wife beside husband. The marriage is complete, and with it, the structure of Olympus changes. Zeus has gained something no earlier union gave him, permanently a royal counterpart whose authority helps define the household he rules. Hera has gained the highest position available within the Olympian order, but she has also accepted the throne from the earlier warning, a throne that cannot easily be abandoned. Soon she will discover what queenship beside Zeus truly costs, because the sacred fires are still burning when the first shadows of contradiction begin to gather. The god who has married the guardian of marriage will not become faithful, and the goddess whose wedding symbolizes divine order will spend much of eternity defending that order against her own husband. You remain near the sacred fires after the wedding, while the celebration of Olympus slowly settles into night. The music has softened, golden vessels rest on long tables beneath the columns, and the scent of incense still hangs in the cool mountain air. Beyond the palace terraces, clouds drift below you like a pale sea. Stars fill the darkness overhead, and far beneath them the scattered lamps of mortal settlements flicker along the valleys and distant coast. Zeus and Hera are married. Brother and sister have become husband and wife. For you, this may still be the most unsettling part of the story. For the ancient Greeks, it was also unusual, but not for exactly the same reasons. The important distinction is that what happens among the gods does not automatically describe what humans should do. Divine genealogy follows its own logic. You have already seen this pattern before Zeus and Hera. Their parents, Cronus and Rhea, are siblings. Cronus himself belongs to a generation born from Gaia and Uranus, earth and sky, whose relationships form the architecture of creation. When the universe begins with only a few primordial beings, divine families inevitably fold inward. Gods marry gods who are already relatives, but the pattern is more than a consequence of limited divine company. It expresses something about power. Imagine looking at the genealogy not as a family tree but as a map of the cosmos. Gaia is earth, Uranus is sky, Oceanus embodies the great encircling waters, Helios becomes the sun, Selene the moon, Poseidon receives the sea, Hades receives the dead, Zeus commands the heavens. These are not ordinary people forming an ordinary household. Their births and marriages describe relationships between forces that ancient storytellers imagined as living personalities. Divine kinship makes the universe into one enormous family. And families, as Greek myths repeatedly remind you, can be places of both belonging and danger. That danger matters when you return to Zeus and Hera. Both possess the same royal ancestry. Both are children of Cronus and Rhea. Both belong to the generation that replaced the Titans. By marrying Hera, Zeus does not bring an outsider into the highest level of Olympian authority. He joins himself to another member of the victorious dynasty. Their union concentrates legitimacy. King and queen descend from the same divine parents. The throne remains within the house that conquered heaven. To understand why this might matter symbolically, you can descend for a moment from Olympus into the mortal Greek world. Dawn is approaching over an ancient city. You walk along narrow streets while merchants begin opening wooden shutters. Somewhere bread is baking. Smoke rises from household hearths. A donkey's hooves strike stone. And from the harbour comes the creak of ropes against wooden ships. Families matter deeply here. Inheritance matters. Ancestry matters. Marriage can connect households and shape the transmission of property, status, and citizenship. Yet ordinary Greeks were not expected to imitate Zeus and Hera's sibling marriage. Customs varied between communities, and some close-kin marriages accepted in particular contexts could differ from later European expectations. But full sibling marriage was not the normal model represented by the Olympian couple. The gods remain exceptional. That distinction allows worshippers to honour Zeus and Hera without treating every detail of their mythology as human instruction. A sailor can pray to Poseidon without commanding earthquakes. A warrior can sacrifice to Ares without believing endless violence is virtuous. A bride can invoke Hera without reproducing Hera's divine genealogy. Myth gives the gods behaviours appropriate to beings who existed before human social rules. Yet there may be another layer beneath the story. You remember the great sanctuaries of Hera, Argos, Samos, places where generations worshipped her with an intensity that suggests deep and ancient roots. Some modern researchers have wondered whether the marriage of Zeus and Hera preserves traces of religious traditions coming together over time. Perhaps communities devoted to powerful local forms of Hera eventually understood her beside the increasingly dominant figure of Zeus. Perhaps the mythology of marriage helped explain the relationship between cults whose histories were older and more complicated than surviving poetry can reveal. The evidence cannot tell you a simple story of one religion replacing another. Ancient Greek religion developed through centuries of movement, exchange, local continuity, migration, and storytelling. But the possibility adds another meaning to the wedding. A divine marriage can unite more than gods. It can unite traditions. You climb again toward Olympus as sunlight begins touching the highest peaks. Zeus stands on a terrace overlooking the world. Beside him is Hera. For the first time, you can see what their paired rule represents. Zeus embodies sovereignty. Hera embodies queenship and marriage. He commands from the center of a divine hierarchy. She gives sacred weight to the household at its center. Their shared blood makes them parallel powers within the same generation. And perhaps that is why no earlier partner could occupy Hera's place. Metis brought wisdom, but Zeus absorbed her. Themis brought order. Mnemosyne brought memory. Other unions produced essential divine children. But Hera remains visible beside him. She has not vanished into Zeus. She has not become merely a chapter in his genealogy. She possesses her own throne. This equality of presence does not mean equality of power in every myth. Zeus remains the supreme ruler, and Hera will repeatedly discover the boundaries of her authority. But those boundaries matter precisely because she stands so high. When Hera challenges Zeus, heaven notices. When Hera is humiliated, the dignity of the queen is humiliated. When Hera becomes angry, her anger can reshape mortal destinies. The marriage has placed two formidable wills inside one household, and the old warning from Cronus's age returns. Family and sovereignty are dangerous when they occupy the same room. Perhaps Zeus hears thunder beyond the horizon and remembers his father. Perhaps Hera remembers the cuckoo trembling against her during the storm. Neither memory has disappeared. The marriage may have united the ruling bloodline, but it has not erased what came before. Then, as morning brightens, an eagle circles high above Olympus. The bird rises once, twice, then disappears into a bank of cloud. To an ancient observer, an eagle could be a sign of Zeus, a creature associated with his majesty and authority. But imagine Hera watching it vanish. Is the omen promising that Zeus's kingship will endure, or warning that the king will never remain where his queen expects him to be? No one can know. Soon the answer begins to emerge. Because Hera is about to take her place fully as Queen of Heaven. She will receive honor, worship, and sacred authority. And from that highest throne, she will discover the central contradiction of her immortality. The goddess entrusted with protecting marriage has married the one god least likely to respect its boundaries. You return to Olympus in the first quiet days after the sacred wedding, when the flowers have begun to fade but the meaning of the marriage is only beginning to unfold. Morning light pours across the palace terraces, clouds drift beneath the mountain like slow rivers of white. The marble beneath your feet is cool, polished by an immortal world that exists somewhere between poetry and prayer. From the inner halls comes the scent of burning incense and fresh olive oil, while far below, mortal Greece awakens beside harbours, fields, and sacred groves. At the centre of heaven, two thrones now stand together. Zeus takes one, Hera takes the other. The image appears simple, but represents something Zeus's earlier relationships never created. A permanent royal household. Hera has become queen of the gods. Later artists would give her the signs of majesty appropriate to that position, a crown or polos rising above her head, a veil falling around her shoulders, sometimes a scepter held with calm authority. The peacock became famously associated with her in later tradition, while older symbols such as the cuckoo carried memories of her courtship. But before any symbol, there is presence. Hera sits beside Zeus. She belongs there. Imagine approaching her as an ancient worshipper might have approached one of her sanctuaries. You would not primarily think of her as a furious wife searching for another of Zeus's lovers. That image comes powerfully from mythology. But religion presents something broader. You might come to Hera because a wedding approaches, because childbirth approaches, because a household requires protection, because marriage has moved your life from one stage into another. Perhaps you're a young bride standing before an altar while torchlight moves across carved stone. The smell of sacrifice and incense hangs in the evening air. Your fingers touch fabric prepared for the ceremony. Behind you, relatives speak quietly. You ask Hera to watch over the uncertain life ahead. And somewhere in the divine imagination, Hera understands uncertainty better than almost anyone. Her own marriage has given her extraordinary authority. It has also bound her dignity to Zeus. That is the contradiction beginning to form beneath the calm surface of Olympus. The ancient Greeks did not imagine marriage merely as romantic companionship in the modern sense. It carried expectations involving household continuity, legitimate children, inheritance, social bonds, and the management of family life. Hera's sacred authority belongs within that world. She represents the recognized union, the queen within the divine household, the dignity of marriage as an institution, and Zeus has made her position supreme. Yet Zeus remains Zeus. His desires do not end at the wedding. Perhaps Hera does not know this yet, or perhaps she knows enough about her husband to suspect it. You walk with her through the palace halls. Golden light reflects from columns. Servants of the gods move quietly through distant chambers. The sound of music drifts from somewhere unseen. And through an open doorway you can glimpse blue sky stretching beyond the mountain. Hera's new role changes the way everyone must approach her. She is not simply one Olympian among many. She possesses status, and status will become central to her personality in the surviving stories. When Hera reacts to insult, she reacts as a queen. When she defends marriage, she defends her divine sphere. When Zeus's relationships with other women provoke her, the injury is therefore larger than private jealousy. Every rival threatens to make the queen appear powerless. Every child born outside the marriage becomes visible evidence that Zeus can ignore the institution Hera represents. This does not justify the cruelty Hera sometimes directs toward innocent figures in later myths. Greek storytellers were fully capable of making divine behavior frightening and unfair. But understanding her position allows you to see why her anger becomes so persistent. She cannot simply stop caring. Marriage is not something Hera does. Marriage is part of what Hera is, and the god who has become her husband will repeatedly challenge it. For now, however, the halls remain peaceful. Perhaps Zeus and Hera stand together during a divine gathering. Poseidon arrives from the sea, carrying the smell of salt and storm. Demeter brings the quiet presence of cultivated earth. Hestia's sacred fire burns at the center of the household. Other gods take their places according to honors and relationships that the new Olympian order continues to define. Zeus speaks. The others listen. Then Hera speaks. And they listen to her too. Her authority is not identical to Zeus's, but neither is she invisible beneath it. This may help explain why their later arguments are so memorable. Hera can confront him. She can challenge his decisions. She can scheme against his plans. At times she can persuade, manipulate, or resist the King of Heaven in ways lesser divine figures might not dare attempt. Their marriage becomes almost another arena of cosmic politics. The Titanomachy has ended, but struggle has entered the palace. One evening, Hera walks onto a terrace alone. The sun has disappeared, leaving a violet glow above the western sea. A cool wind moves across Olympus. Below, fires appear one by one in mortal settlements. Then she notices something near the altar. A pomegranate has split open. Its red seeds lie scattered across the pale stone. In Greek symbolism, the pomegranate can evoke fertility, marriage, abundance, and also the mysterious boundary between life and death. You have already seen golden fruit associated with Hera's wedding, and now fruit appears again as a quiet sign. Perhaps a priest would read the broken pomegranate as abundance, many seeds, future children, a flourishing royal household. But Hera sees something else, a single fruit divided, its interior exposed, unity containing countless separate possibilities. Is it an omen? No surviving tradition records this precise moment, but it reflects the kind of symbolic uncertainty through which ancient listeners understood the divine world. Hera bends toward the scattered seeds. She does not yet know how many other women will become entangled in her marriage. Io, letto, semele, kalistu, alkmene, names that will one day carry stories of transformation, exile, childbirth, persecution, and divine jealousy. Nor does she know how deeply those stories will shape the way later generations remember her. The queen who receives prayers from brides will become famous for the failures of her own husband. There is melancholy in that destiny, yet there is strength too. Hera will not surrender her throne. You remember the warning imagined before her marriage. A throne accepted cannot easily be abandoned. Now you understand why. To leave Zeus would mean more than leaving a husband. It would mean abandoning queenship, marriage, and the cosmic identity the sacred wedding has placed at the center of Olympus. So Hera remains, and soon the first cracks appear. Somewhere beyond the palace, thunder rolls across a clear sky. Hera looks toward the sound. Zeus is absent. For the first time since the wedding, the empty space beside her throne feels larger than it should. The empty throne beside Hera remains empty as evening settles over Olympus. You stand near the queen beneath a sky so clear that every distant ridge seems sharply carved against the fading light. Torches burn along the palace colonnade, their flames moving in the mountain wind. Somewhere below, a dog barks beside a farmhouse. Farther away, waves strike the harbour walls of a sleeping coastal town. Zeus has gone. Where he has gone, Hera does not yet say. Perhaps she already knows. Perhaps this is not even the first absence. Greek mythology preserves no neat chronology of Zeus's relationships, and different poets arrange divine and mortal lovers according to the needs of different stories. You cannot open the ancient tradition and find a single agreed sequence of betrayals following the wedding. What survives instead is a pattern. Zeus desires, Zeus pursues, Zeus disguises himself, children are born, and Hera discovers what has happened. The cuckoo in the storm begins to feel less like an isolated deception, and more like a warning. The King of Heaven is a god of transformation. When direct approach is impossible, another shape can be chosen. A mortal man, an animal, a natural phenomenon, a hidden presence. For Hera, this creates an unusual kind of uncertainty. How can you trust appearances when your husband commands the sky itself? Imagine her standing at the edge of Olympus while clouds move beneath the stars. A storm forms over a distant island. Is Zeus there? An eagle crosses the moon. Is it only an eagle? Somewhere a frightened mortal woman looks toward the heavens. Has Zeus noticed her? The mythology of their marriage begins to acquire its permanent tension. Yet calling Hera simply jealous misses much of what is happening. You have seen her become queen. You have watched her take the throne beside Zeus and become the divine guardian of marriage. Her status depends upon the recognition of that union. Zeus's behavior therefore creates a contradiction visible across the entire divine world. The husband of Hera violates the boundaries Hera protects. The king who presides over order brings disorder into his own household. And the queen cannot prevent it, for a goddess associated with dignity. The humiliation is profound. The problem becomes even greater when children appear. A lover may disappear, a child remains. Every divine or heroic child of Zeus can become evidence of a relationship that existed beyond his marriage. Some will become enormously important to Greek mythology. Apollo and Artemis, Hermes, Dionysus, Heracles, Perseus, and others are connected with Zeus through traditions involving mothers outside his marriage with Hera. The divine household expands beyond the queen's control. This echoes something much older. Cronus feared his children because they threatened his throne. Hera will sometimes fear Zeus's children for another reason. They threaten her place, not necessarily by overthrowing her, but by demonstrating how easily Zeus creates bonds outside the household she is meant to protect. And in Greek myth, wounded gods rarely suffer quietly. The consequences fall downward, toward rivals, toward children, toward mortals who have little power to resist. You will eventually follow some of those stories. But for now, the first emotional transformation matters more than any individual victim. Hera begins to watch. Perhaps she notices Zeus returning at dawn. The palace is still blue with early light. Sacred fires burn low. His footsteps move across the polished floor. She asks where he has been. Zeus answers. You do not know what he says. The poets leave this imagined first confrontation to silence. But you know enough about later Zeus to suspect that truth does not always arrive immediately. And Hera knows the god who once approached her as a freezing bird. Trust becomes difficult when your marriage began with disguise. That memory returns now as the first major callback of their life together. The wet feathers, the storm, the vulnerable creature against her body. The revelation. What once appeared to be the clever conclusion of courtship becomes the pattern of the marriage. Zeus can become what circumstances require. Hera cannot stop being Hera. She is queen wherever she goes. She carries marriage with her. That difference traps them both. Zeus's identity allows movement. Hera's identity demands permanence. Below Olympus, mortal worshippers continue honoring the divine couple. A wedding procession moves through an ancient town at twilight. Torches illuminate faces along the road. The bride's clothing brushes against her skin as relatives accompany her toward a new household. Music rises above the sound of sandals on stone. Perhaps someone invokes Zeus and Hera together. To those worshippers, the divine marriage represents something larger than the quarrels told by poets. Sacred union, household order, continuity. The mythology does not destroy that religious meaning. Instead, the contradiction seems to deepen it. Marriage requires maintenance precisely because harmony cannot be assumed. Promises matter because they can be broken. Social order matters because disorder is always possible. The gods themselves dramatize the danger. On Olympus, Hera's anger begins to grow. Not violently yet, more like distant weather. A change in pressure, a coolness entering a room. Zeus notices. Other gods notice too. The divine household learns that the queen remembers. One night Hera dreams. She sees the wedding altar again. The sacred flame burns exactly as it did when she became queen. Beside it stands the golden apple tree given in traditions of her marriage, its branches heavy with shining fruit. Then the wind rises. One golden apple falls. It rolls across the stone floor before Hera can reach it. The apple divides into countless reflections, each moving down a different corridor. Hera follows one, then another. Every corridor leads away from Olympus, across seas, into forests, toward towers, toward mortal bedrooms, toward hidden caves. She wakes before sunrise. The room is cold. Beside her, Zeus sleeps. Was the dream a warning? There is no ancient source preserving such a vision. But the symbolism belongs naturally to the world Hera inhabits, the sacred fruit of marriage multiplied into paths beyond marriage. And soon those paths become impossible to ignore. Ancient traditions will tell of Io wandering beneath Hera's anger, of Leto searching for a place to give birth, of Semele destroyed after Hera enters her story, and of Heracles suffering because his existence represents Zeus's betrayal. Yet something else will happen through these conflicts. Hera will become more than the bride who accepted a throne. She will become an active political force on Olympus. She will resist. She will manipulate. Eventually she will even participate in a rebellion against Zeus himself. The marriage designed to stabilize heaven will create conflict at heaven's center. Outside, the first light of morning touches the eastern horizon. Zeus rises. Hera watches him leave the chamber. Neither speaks. Perhaps nothing dramatic has happened yet. No thunderbolt. No curse. No divine confrontation. Only distance. Sometimes that is how the greatest fractures begin. Not with a storm, with an empty throne, with a question unanswered, with the memory of a cuckoo trembling beneath cold rain. And as Zeus disappears into the brightness beyond the columns, Hera begins to understand that becoming Queen of Heaven has given her almost everything, except control over the king beside her. You remain with Hera as the quiet distance inside the Olympian palace begins to change into something more enduring. Morning spreads over the mountains in pale gold. The stone terraces are still cold from the night, and thin clouds drift across the valleys below. Somewhere beyond Olympus, farmers lead oxen toward fields dark with newly turned soil, at a coastal sanctuary, Attendants sweep yesterday's ash from an altar, while ships move slowly across the brightening sea. The mortal world continues beneath an apparently ordered heaven. But inside the divine household, order has become complicated. Zeus rules, Hera reigns beside him, and neither position guarantees peace. You begin to understand that the marriage between them is not simply a love story that went wrong. It is also a relationship between two forms of authority. Zeus embodies kingship at its highest level. His thunderbolt announces power. His decisions can settle disputes among gods. Oaths and hospitality fall within his vast sphere. From mountain summits and sacred precincts, worshippers honor the god whose sky stretches above every city. Hera's authority is different. It enters the household, the wedding procession, the recognized wife, the continuity of family, the dignity that comes from a union acknowledged before community and gods. When Zeus breaks the expectations of their marriage, therefore, Hera experiences more than private betrayal. Her office is challenged. Imagine a divine feast on Olympus. Torches burn between marble columns. Golden cups pass from hand to hand. Apollo's music moves quietly through the hall. Athena sits in calm attention. Poseidon has come from the sea, carrying something of its cold salt smell with him. Zeus occupies the central place. Hera sits beside him. Everyone knows who they are. Everyone knows what their marriage represents. Then Zeus disappears again. Perhaps no god comments. That silence may hurt more than words. Hera cannot become anonymous. She cannot withdraw into a distant village where no one knows her husband's name. She's queen before the entire cosmos. Every betrayal occurs beneath the gaze of heaven. That is why status becomes so important in stories about her. To modern audiences, Hera's anger can appear irrational because it often falls upon Zeus's lovers or children rather than Zeus himself. Ancient mythology offers no simple moral defense for that behavior. Gods can act unjustly. Innocent mortals can suffer because divine powers pursue their own rivalries. But there is a structural reason Hera so often attacks outward. Zeus is difficult to punish. He is stronger. He possesses the thunderbolt. The Titanomachy has established his supremacy. The prophecy of Cronus has already shown what happens when divine authority changes hands. And Hera has no obvious power capable of replacing Zeus permanently. So anger travels toward those she can reach. This is not peace. It is power constrained by greater power. You walk with Hera beyond the palace into a sacred grove where the air is cooler beneath the trees. Wind moves through cypress branches. Bees hum near wildflowers. A spring emerges between rocks, and its water is cold against your fingertips. Here the queen can be imagined apart from Zeus again. Perhaps she remembers the goddess she was before the wedding. The sister who survived Cronus. The daughter of Rhea. The divine woman who could refuse the king of heaven. That earlier refusal now feels distant. The warning before the marriage returns once more. A throne accepted cannot easily be abandoned. Why not leave? The question seems simple until you remember what leaving would mean. If Hera abandons Zeus, does she abandon queenship? Can the goddess of marriage dissolve the marriage at the center of Olympus? What would such a separation mean for the sacred union worshippers invoked below? Greek traditions do not give you a straightforward theology of divine divorce. Instead, they preserve stories of separation, anger, reconciliation, and renewed union. One later tale even imagines Hera withdrawing from Zeus and forcing him to devise a trick to bring her back. Zeus announces or stages another marriage, provoking Hera to return, only for the supposed bride to be revealed as an image or deception. Even reconciliation becomes another trick. Whether such stories preserve ritual traditions, humorous myth, or reflections on the recurring renewal of marriage remains debated. But the pattern is revealing. Hera may leave temporarily. She returns. Zeus may provoke her. He still needs her. Their marriage bends without completely breaking. Perhaps that is the deeper mystery. Why does Zeus keep Hera as queen when her resistance causes him so much trouble? He has other partners. He has children with goddesses and mortals. He possesses enough power to command nearly everyone around him. Yet Hera remains beside him. because Hera provides something those relationships do not: legitimacy made visible. The king and queen together form a complete divine household. Zeus alone is sovereign power. Zeus beside Hera becomes royal order. The difference is subtle but enormous, and Hera understands it. Her power exists partly because Zeus needs what she represents. This gives her room to resist. Not unlimited room, but enough. One evening, as clouds gather beyond Olympus, Hera receives a strange sign. A priestess at one of her distant sanctuaries watches smoke rise from a sacrifice. Instead of drifting upward, the smoke separates into two streams. One moves toward the mountain, the other toward the sea. Then the wind turns, bringing both streams together again above the altar. Perhaps those present interpret the omen as reconciliation after division. Perhaps they see king and queen temporarily separated but bound by sacred order. Or perhaps the sign concerns something entirely different. Ancient omens were rarely as simple as later storytellers make them appear. Still, the image belongs to Hera's marriage. Two wills, two powers, one divine household. The next conflicts will test that household more severely. Children will be born. Questions of legitimacy will deepen. Hera will discover that motherhood can become another field of rivalry between herself and Zeus. And one child in particular will carry a story so strange that ancient traditions cannot even agree upon the identity of his father, Hephaestus. In some accounts, he belongs to Zeus and Hera together. In another famous tradition, Hera produces him without Zeus, perhaps in response to Zeus bringing Athena into existence without her. The marriage becomes a contest over creation itself. Who needs whom? Can Zeus produce a daughter without a mother? Can Hera produce a son without a father? Behind these extraordinary stories lies the same tension you've been following since the cuckoo appeared in the storm. Marriage joins, power divides. As nights settle across the sacred grove, you hear thunder far beyond the mountain. Hera looks upward. This time she does not appear frightened. She knows that sound too well. The storm belongs to her husband, but the throne beside his belongs to her. And if Zeus believes marriage has made Hera obedient, he has misunderstood the goddess he married. The Queen of Heaven is beginning to discover that remaining beside Zeus does not require remaining silent. You follow Hera back from the sacred grove toward Olympus, where the marriage that joined two children of Cronus begins producing another generation. The palace is quiet in the hours before dawn. Sacred flames burn low inside bronze vessels. Cool air moves through the open colonnades, carrying the scent of cedar smoke and mountain herbs. Beyond the clouds, the mortal countryside remains dark, except for scattered hearth fires glowing in farmhouses and small settlements. Within the royal household, children change everything. For Zeus and Hera, parenthood does not simply enlarge a family, it extends their marriage into the structure of the cosmos. Among the children commonly associated with their union are Ares, Hebe, and Eileithyia. Hephaestus belongs to them together in some traditions, while Hesiod preserves the striking alternative that Hera bears him without Zeus. The disagreements matter. Greek mythology was shaped by many poets, communities, sanctuaries, and oral traditions. The divine family tree could shift depending upon who told the story and what meaning the story needed to carry. But begin with Ares. You can imagine Hera holding him while distant thunder moves beyond Olympus. The child who will become associated with the violent fury of battle is born into a marriage already filled with conflict. Ares grows beneath the roof of the king and queen of heaven. Yet later literature does not portray Zeus as especially fond of him. In the Iliad, Zeus speaks to Ares with extraordinary hostility, condemning his delight in conflict. There is something melancholy in the image. The child of the divine marriage embodies a force his own father finds difficult to love. Perhaps ancient audiences recognize something familiar there. Children inherit qualities their parents cannot always control. A household may create lives that develop far beyond its intentions, and Ares carries conflict outward, where armies gather, where bronze strikes bronze, where dust rises beneath running feet. His presence can be felt. Yet another child brings a gentler image. Hebe, Youth. You see her moving through Olympus in the brightness of morning, pouring nectar for the gods in traditions where she serves as cupbearer. Her presence suggests renewal, freshness, and the beauty of life before age begins its slow work. Later she'll become the wife of Heracles after his apotheosis. That future is deeply ironic. The daughter of Hera will marry the hero Hera once persecuted. The family that suffered through divine hostility will eventually become joined through marriage. Greek myth often allows time to transform enemies into relatives. Perhaps that is an omen of something Hera cannot yet imagine. Then there is Eileithyia. Her sphere is childbirth. The daughter born from the divine marriage becomes associated with the dangerous threshold through which mortal families continue. You descend from Olympus for a moment and enter a Greek household at night. A woman labours inside a room lit by oil lamps. The air smells of smoke, wool, sweat, and herbs. Outside, relatives wait beneath a star-filled sky. Voices remain low. Childbirth in the ancient world can be dangerous. There is no certainty that mother and infant will survive. A prayer to Eileithyia therefore carries urgency. The divine daughter of Zeus and Hera is not an abstract figure. She stands near one of life's most frightening transitions. Through her, the marriage of Zeus and Hera becomes connected to the continuation of mortal households. But it is Hephaestus who brings the strangest mystery. In one tradition, Zeus and Hera are his parents. In Hesiod's Theogony, however, Hera bears Hephaestus without sexual union with Zeus. Why? The poem presents the birth as an act connected with anger and rivalry. Zeus has produced Athena from himself. Athena emerges from his head. A daughter born without the ordinary role of a mother. Hera responds, if Zeus can create without her, she will create without him. The rivalry that once concerned lovers now reaches into reproduction itself. You remember Metis? Zeus swallowed her after hearing the prophecy that she might bear a son destined to replace him. Athena nevertheless emerged from Zeus, carrying the wisdom associated with her mother, while appearing publicly from the body of her father. Imagine Hera witnessing that birth. The sky flashes. Zeus cries out in pain. A blow opens his head. Athena emerges armed. The gods stare. Zeus has apparently done what no husband should be able to do alone. He has become the source of his own child. For Hera, this can be read as another challenge to her position. Marriage joins male and female households through reproduction. But Zeus has bypassed his queen completely. So Hera answers with Hephaestus. Yet the answer brings pain. Later traditions tell different stories about Hephaestus's physical impairment and his fall from Olympus. In one famous account, Hera rejects him because he is born lame and casts him from heaven. Elsewhere, Zeus throws him down after Hephaestus intervenes in a quarrel between Zeus and Hera. Again, there is no single version, but both traditions place the child inside the conflict of his parents. You imagine him falling through the sky. Clouds rush past. The bright halls of Olympus disappear above him. Below waits the dark blue sea. In some stories he lands on Lemnos, an island that becomes deeply associated with him. There, among volcanic landscapes and the imagined glow of subterranean fire, the rejected child becomes the master craftsman of the gods. The symbolism is striking. What Olympus casts away returns through skill. Hephaestus creates armor, jewelry, thrones, palaces, and impossible mechanisms. His hands shape beauty from fire and metal. Rejection becomes craftsmanship. Pain becomes creation. And one later tale tells how he sends Hera an extraordinary golden throne. She sits. Invisible bonds trap her. The queen cannot rise. The child once rejected by his mother has made the throne of queenship itself into a prison. A warning could hardly be clearer. What a family casts away may return. What a parent wounds may remember. Eventually Hephaestus is brought back to Olympus, with Dionysus playing a memorable role in some traditions. But the image of Hera trapped upon the golden throne lingers. You remember another warning from long before. A throne accepted cannot easily be abandoned. Now the metaphor becomes almost literal. Hera possesses the highest seat among goddesses, yet the same position can bind her. Wife, queen, mother, each title gives authority. Each creates obligations. Outside the palace, morning begins, sunlight touches the peaks, and the sacred fires brighten against the pale stone. Hera looks across her children, Ares carrying conflict, Hebe carrying youth, Eileithyia standing beside birth, Hephaestus carrying the complicated memory of rejection and creation. The royal marriage has produced life, but not simplicity. And Hera's desire to defend her dignity is beginning to change. She has endured Zeus's absences. She has watched his power cross the boundaries of marriage. She has seen even childbirth become a contest between them. Soon, endurance will no longer be enough. The queen who once refused Zeus will remember that she can resist him again, not merely as a wounded wife, as a goddess, as a daughter of Cronus, as one of the immortals who fought to create the Olympian order, and somewhere in the palace, perhaps beneath the glow of the same sacred fire that witnessed their wedding, a dangerous thought begins to form. What would Olympus look like without Zeus on the throne? The dangerous thought does not disappear. It follows Hera through the bright halls of Olympus, beneath columns washed in morning sunlight and past the sacred fires that have burned since the new divine order began. Outside, mountain mist drifts slowly across the slopes. Nothing in the calm landscape suggests rebellion, but Hera remembers. She remembers Cronus. She remembers Zeus returning to free the swallowed generation. She remembers the Titanomachy, when the younger gods stood together against a ruler who believed his authority could never be challenged. And now Zeus is the ruler. That resemblance carries its own warning. Greek myth preserves a remarkable episode in the Iliad in which Hera recalls a time when she, Poseidon, Athena, and other Olympians conspired against Zeus. The details are tantalizingly incomplete. Homer assumes his audience can follow the memory without explaining everything that led to the rebellion. Perhaps an older story once circulated more fully. Perhaps generations of singers knew details that disappeared. Historians continue to debate what traditions may lie behind the surviving passage. For you, the uncertainty makes the night on Olympus feel even quieter. Imagine Hera moving through the palace after Zeus has withdrawn. Torchlight trembles along the walls. Poseidon arrives from the sea, his clothing carrying the smell of salt. Athena comes silently, her expression difficult to read. These are not weak gods. Poseidon once stood beside Zeus against Cronus. Athena, born from Zeus's head, possesses formidable intelligence. And Hera is queen. Perhaps their reasons differ. Poseidon may resent the authority of his brother. Athena may have her own grievance in the older tradition. Hera carries years of humiliation and frustration, but for one extraordinary moment, their interests align. Zeus must be restrained. The plan succeeds briefly. The king of heaven is bound. Imagine the silence afterward. No thunder, no lightning. The ruler who once released his siblings from Cronus is now unable to move because those closest to him have turned against him. The old prophecy seems almost alive again. A ruler falls through family betrayal. Uranus, Cronus, now Zeus. Perhaps Hera looks at her husband and wonders whether the cycle has finally reached him. Yet there is a difference. Zeus has allies beyond the immediate household. The sea goddess Thetis learns what has happened. She summons Briareus, one of the 100-handers, also called Aegeon in the Homeric passage. You have met his kind before. During the Titanomachy, Zeus released the 100-handers from imprisonment, and their overwhelming strength helped defeat the Titans. Now that old decision returns. A favor given during the war becomes protection generations later. This is the world of Greek myth. No alliance entirely disappears. Briareus comes to Olympus. His presence changes everything. The gods who bound Zeus understand that the rebellion cannot continue. The king is released, and the atmosphere of Olympus changes immediately. The rebellion has failed. Zeus knows who challenged him. Hera has crossed a boundary that anger alone never crossed. She didn't merely complain. She helped restrain the sovereign of heaven. Later mythological traditions preserve severe images of Zeus punishing Hera, including the famous story in which she hangs from heaven with golden chains or bonds around her wrists and heavy anvils attached to her feet. Homer has Zeus himself recall this punishment while warning Hera not to oppose him. Whether every version of the punishment originally belonged to the same rebellion is uncertain, but the image is unforgettable. You see Hera suspended above the clouds. Below her lies the distant world. Mountains appear small. The Aegean glitters in the afternoon light. Her arms ache beneath the bonds, the weight below pulls relentlessly downward. Other gods see their queen suffering. They cannot free her. Zeus has transformed domestic conflict into public demonstration. The message is unmistakable. Hera may be queen, Zeus is king. You remember the golden throne of Hephaestus. Once Hera became trapped by the craftsmanship of her rejected son. Now she is trapped by the authority of her husband. Again, queenship and imprisonment seem strangely close. Yet punishment does not erase Hera. That may be the most important part. She remains queen. Zeus does not replace her. He does not dissolve the sacred marriage. He demonstrates supremacy. Then the divine household continues. Why? Because the relationship is larger than affection, larger even than rebellion. The union of Zeus and Hera has become structural. Remove Hera permanently and Zeus loses the queen whose authority completes the royal household. Remove Zeus and Hera loses the sovereign beside whom her queenship occupies its cosmic position. They can wound each other. They can resist each other. But the Olympian order has made them interdependent. Perhaps Hera realizes this while the chains are removed. Evening has fallen. Her feet touch cold marble again. No apology is preserved for you. No quiet conversation explains what passes between husband and wife afterward. Ancient mythology often leaves reconciliation in silence. But imagine Hera standing beneath the stars. Her wrists still carry the memory of the bonds. Zeus stands somewhere behind her. The wind moves between them. The rebellion has taught Hera the limits of direct confrontation. She cannot defeat Zeus through strength. She cannot remove him from heaven. If she wishes to oppose him, she will need other methods. Delay, deception, manipulation, interference. The same cunning that once helped Zeus defeat Cronus can be used within Zeus's own household, and Hera becomes remarkably skilled at it. She can manipulate events without confronting the thunderbolt directly. She can turn Zeus's desires against him. She can act through mortals. She can target the lives created by his affairs. The queen changes. Her anger becomes strategic. Far below Olympus, a priest watches the night sky from a sanctuary courtyard. A bright streak crosses the darkness. For a moment it appears to fall from the region of Olympus toward the earth. A divine sign, a wandering light. No one knows. But perhaps the priest whispers that something from heaven is descending toward mortal lives. The interpretation is strangely appropriate, because the conflict between Zeus and Hera will no longer remain primarily inside their palace. It is about to descend into forests, across islands, through royal households, into the lives of women who never asked to become part of an immortal marriage. Io, Leto, Semele, Callisto, and eventually Alcmene. The names wait across the mortal world like distant lights. Hera cannot strike Zeus from his throne, so the consequences of his behavior will increasingly fall upon those around him. It is one of the darker lessons of Greek mythology. Power rarely harms only those who possess it. When gods quarrel, mortals suffer. You leave Hera standing beneath the stars as the mountain wind cools the palace stones. The chains are gone, but the warning remains. She has discovered that Zeus can punish rebellion. Zeus has discovered that Hera is capable of rebellion. Neither can ever again pretend that the sacred wedding created obedience. And somewhere far below, beside a river shining beneath the moon, another story is already beginning. A mortal woman looks toward the sky. Zeus has noticed her, and soon Hera will notice her too. You leave the heights of Olympus and descend toward the mortal world, where the conflicts of the gods begin to cast longer shadows. The path leads downward through mountain forests where morning mist clings to the trees. The air changes as you travel. The cold, clear winds of Olympus become warmer and heavier. You smell wild flowers, damp soil, wood smoke, and the distant salt of the sea. Here, beneath the watchful sky of Zeus, ordinary lives continue. Farmers work their fields. Sailors guide ships through dangerous waters. Families gather beside small household fires. Most mortals will never see the gods directly. But in Greek mythology, divine attention is never harmless, especially when Zeus is involved. You have followed the story of his marriage with Hera from the beginning. You have seen their shared childhood beneath Cronus's fear. You have watched them fight beside each other against the Titans. You have witnessed their sacred wedding and the creation of their royal household. Now the contradiction at the center of their marriage becomes impossible to ignore. Zeus is the protector of marriage, yet Zeus repeatedly crosses the boundaries of his own marriage. And Hera, the goddess who represents the sacred union, responds not only against her husband, but often against those who become connected to him. The first of these stories belongs to Io. You travel to the lands near the river Inachus, where ancient traditions connected the young woman with Argos. The landscape is fertile. Green fields stretch beside flowing water. Olive trees grow beneath the bright Mediterranean sun, and white clouds move slowly across the endless blue sky. Io is remembered as a beautiful mortal woman, sometimes described as a priestess connected with Hera's own worship. That detail makes the story especially painful. The woman drawn into Zeus's attention is not a distant stranger. She is connected to Hera's sacred sphere. According to one famous tradition, Zeus desires Io and attempts to hide the relationship from Hera by creating a cloud around them. But Hera is not easily deceived. She sees the strange darkness covering the earth and becomes suspicious. A queen who has learned the language of deception recognizes when something is hidden. Zeus transforms Io into a white cow to conceal her. The transformation is clever, but Hera understands that appearances are not always what they seem. She asks for the beautiful animal as a gift. Zeus cannot easily refuse without revealing the truth, so Io is placed under Hera's control. The queen gives her to Argus Panoptes, the 100-eyed guardian who never sleeps because his many eyes are always watching. Imagine the scene: a sacred grove beneath moonlight, the quiet sound of insects, the cow standing alone beneath ancient trees. Around her walks Argus, always awake, always watching. Io has become trapped between two divine powers. Zeus wants to protect her. Hera wants to expose the betrayal. Neither fully considers the suffering of the mortal caught between them. Eventually Zeus sends Hermes to rescue Io. Hermes arrives disguised as a traveller and uses music and storytelling to defeat Argus's endless vigilance. The 100 eyes finally close. Io is freed. But Hera is not finished. She sends a gadfly to torment Io, forcing her to wander across lands and seas. The woman who was once a priestess becomes a traveller without rest. You can almost feel the endless movement: hot winds across empty plains, cold nights beneath unfamiliar stars, the sting of insects, the sound of waves against unknown shores. The story spreads Io's suffering across the ancient world. Some later traditions connect her journey with distant places and peoples, including Egypt, where she eventually finds restoration and gives birth to descendants who become important in Greek myth. Historians and classicists continue to examine how much of Io's story may preserve memories of cultural connections between Greece and the Eastern Mediterranean. But within the myth itself, one theme remains: a divine conflict has become a mortal journey. Io suffers because she becomes part of the marriage between Zeus and Hera, and she is not the last. Another story leads you toward Leto. The landscape changes. You travel across islands and coastlines searching for a place where Leto can give birth to Apollo and Artemis. But Hera's anger follows her. Traditions tell that Hera, furious because Leto carries Zeus's children, prevents the goddess from finding a safe place to deliver them. The image is haunting: a pregnant goddess wandering beneath an enormous sky. Islands refuse her. Coasts turn away. The sea stretches endlessly before her. Finally, Delos accepts her. A small rocky island becomes the birthplace of two of the most important gods in Greek religion. Again, the irony is profound. Hera's attempt to prevent the birth creates a story that makes Apollo and Artemis even more extraordinary. The children of the rejected mother become among the greatest divine powers. Ancient Greeks would later build magnificent sanctuaries to Apollo, including the famous sanctuary at Delphi, where prophecy became associated with his voice. A child born from conflict becomes a god of harmony, music, healing, and order. Myth often transforms suffering into meaning. Yet Hera's role remains complicated. She is not portrayed simply as evil. She's a goddess wounded by betrayal, defending a position that the mythology itself places under constant threat. But the stories also reveal the danger of power without restraint. A goddess capable of protecting marriage can also become a force of punishment. A king capable of protecting humanity can also become the source of suffering. The gods are powerful because they are larger than humans. They are frightening for the same reason. As night falls, you return to Olympus in imagination. The palace glows with torchlight. Zeus sits upon his throne. Hera sits beside him. They have not separated. They never truly leave each other's story. The marriage survives, but every mortal touched by Zeus's desires becomes another reminder of the contradiction inside the divine household. A warning appears in the sky. A comet-like streak crosses above the mountains and disappears beyond the sea. Ancient observers might interpret such a sight as a message from the gods, a sign of change, a reminder that heaven and earth remain connected. Perhaps Hera watches it silently. Perhaps Zeus does too. Neither knows how many more stories will emerge from their marriage. Neither knows how many lives will be shaped by their conflict. Because one of the greatest consequences of Zeus and Hera's union is not what happens inside Olympus. It is what happens when Olympus looks downward. And soon, one child born from Zeus's betrayal will become the greatest symbol of Hera's anger. A child whose name will be remembered for thousands of years. Heracles, you leave the shores where Io wandered and follow the path of another story, one that will bind Zeus, Hera, and the mortal world together more tightly than any before. The road leads to the ancient land of Mycenae and the surrounding regions of the Greek mainland. The landscape is different from the divine heights of Olympus. Here, the earth feels closer. Fields stretch beneath open skies. Stone walls surround old settlements. Shepherds move across hills where wild grasses bend beneath the wind. This is the world of heroes, and among all the heroes of Greek mythology, none will become more closely connected to Hera than Heracles. The irony begins before he's even born, because Heracles is not the child of Zeus and Hera. He's the child of Zeus and a mortal woman named Alcmene, and yet his name will forever carry Hera's. Heracles means something like the glory of Hera, a strange name for a hero whose life begins as a consequence of Hera's anger. But Greek mythology often moves through contradictions. The same goddess who opposes Heracles will eventually become part of his greatest transformation. The same woman who sends suffering toward him will later, in some traditions, accept him among the gods. Before that reconciliation can happen, however, you must return to the beginning. Zeus sees Alcmene. Like many of his other relationships, the story involves transformation. Alcmene is the wife of Amphitryon, a mortal warrior, according to tradition. Zeus takes the form of Amphitryon while the husband is away and approaches Alcmene. The night becomes unusually long. Ancient storytellers explain this by saying Zeus commands the sun not to rise, extending the darkness so he can remain with her. Imagine that strange night. The world waits for morning. Roosters do not call. The stars remain above the silent fields. The moon continues its path while time itself seems to pause. A mortal woman lies beneath a sky that has been altered by a god. From this union, Heracles is born. But Zeus is not the only force shaping the child's destiny. Hera knows. She has discovered another betrayal. And this time, the child is not a distant figure. This child is destined to become one of Zeus's greatest descendants. A rival, a reminder, a living symbol of her husband's actions. Some traditions describe Hera attempting to delay Heracles' birth by preventing Alcmene from giving birth at the proper time. The goddess of childbirth herself, Eileithyia, becomes involved in the conflict. You remember Eileithyia, the daughter associated with Hera's own marriage. Now the power connected with birth becomes part of a struggle surrounding a child outside that marriage. Eventually Heracles is born, but Hera's anger does not end. The most famous story comes when Heracles is still an infant. Night covers the household, oil lamps flicker softly. The child sleeps in his cradle. Outside, the world is quiet. Then Hera sends 2 serpents. They move through the darkness toward the sleeping infant. An omen of death enters the room, but the child wakes, and even as an infant, Heracles displays impossible strength. He grips the serpents and destroys them. The household discovers him holding the creatures as if they were simple toys. The child Hera intended to remove has revealed that he is extraordinary. You can imagine the silence afterward. The parents, the servants, the fear, the wonder. The prophecy surrounding Zeus's descendants has taken another form. Not a child who will overthrow Zeus, a child who will become almost impossible to defeat. But Hera's hostility continues. The reasons are understandable within the emotional structure of the myth. Heracles represents everything painful about Zeus's behavior. He is proof of betrayal. Proof that the king of heaven can create a new family beyond the queen. Yet the mythology also asks another question. Why does Hera focus so intensely on Heracles? Many children of Zeus are born from other relationships. Why does this one become the greatest target of her anger? Perhaps because Heracles becomes the most visible. His strength is enormous. His adventures spread across the Greek world. His name becomes connected with cities, sanctuaries, and royal families. Every achievement he makes reflects back on Zeus. Every victory announces the greatness of a son Hera did not choose. And so the struggle between Hera and Heracles becomes a struggle over meaning. Who controls destiny? The jealous wife? The powerful father? The extraordinary child? The answer changes throughout the story. Heracles suffers. Hera sends madness upon him in one of the darkest traditions associated with his life, causing him to commit an act of terrible tragedy against his own family. The story is painful because Heracles is not defeated by an enemy army. He is defeated by a divine force entering his own mind. Afterward, he must seek purification and redemption. The hero who can fight monsters cannot easily escape himself. Ancient audiences would have recognized something deeply human in this. Even the strongest person can suffer from forces beyond control. Strength does not remove vulnerability. Power does not erase grief. Heracles' journey becomes one of endurance. And Hera, despite being the source of many trials, becomes connected to the process through which he achieves immortality. Later traditions tell that after Heracles' death, Zeus brings him among the gods. There, he's reconciled with Hera. In some versions, Hera even accepts him and gives him her daughter Hebe as his wife. The child she once hated becomes part of her divine household. Again, Greek mythology refuses simple endings. Enemies become family. Suffering becomes transformation. The person who carries Hera's name begins as her greatest victim and ends as someone accepted among the immortals. Tonight, as you imagine Olympus after this long history, the palace feels different. The same halls remain, the same sacred fires burn, but time has changed everyone. Hera is no longer only the angry queen pursuing Zeus's children. Her story with Heracles reveals something more complicated. She's a goddess trapped between her wounded dignity and the larger order of fate. Zeus is no longer simply the victorious king who escaped Cronus. He is also the father whose desires create consequences beyond his control. And Heracles is no longer merely the child of betrayal. He becomes the hero who carries suffering into glory. A prophecy seems to linger over Olympus, not written on stone, not spoken by an oracle, but carried through memory. What begins in conflict may not end in destruction. What begins with hatred may one day become acceptance. The stars shine above the mountains. A quiet wind moves through the olive trees, and far below, mortals continue telling the story of the child who survived Hera's anger and became the greatest hero of Greece. But the marriage of Zeus and Hera still has many chapters left. Because even after Heracles, even after countless conflicts, one truth remains. The king and queen of heaven cannot escape each other. You leave the dramatic storms of myth behind for a moment and walk into the quieter world of ancient worship, where Hera existed not only as Zeus's troubled wife, but as one of the most honoured goddesses of Greece. The morning sun rises over the hills. A narrow path leads you through olive trees toward a sanctuary built of pale stone. The air smells of earth, smoke, and crushed leaves. Birds move through the branches above you, somewhere nearby. Priests prepare offerings while visitors arrive carrying gifts wrapped carefully in cloth. This is where Hera's other story begins. Not the jealous queen, not the goddess pursuing Zeus's lovers. The goddess worshipped by generations of people who believed she protected some of the most important transitions of human life. Marriage, family, birth, community. The mythology surrounding Hera can feel full of conflict, but her religious role reveals a deeper complexity. Ancient Greeks could tell stories of her anger and still approach her altar with devotion. They could remember her arguments with Zeus and still ask for her blessing. They could see her suffering and still understand her as powerful. The gods were never required to be perfect. They were required to be significant. And Hera was deeply significant. You walk first toward Argos. The landscape opens beneath a wide sky. The Argive plain stretches outward with mountains surrounding it like a natural amphitheatre. Here stood the Heraion of Argos, one of the most important sanctuaries dedicated to Hera. Archaeological remains reveal a place that was rebuilt and developed over centuries. Temples rose, offerings accumulated, ritual activity continued across generations. The stones themselves preserve memory, fragments of pottery, bronze objects, small offerings left by worshippers. Each object represents a moment when someone approached the goddess and believed their prayer mattered. Perhaps a bride came before marriage. Perhaps a family prayed for protection. Perhaps a community honored Hera as the guardian of its identity. You stand among the ruins as the wind passes through broken columns. The temple is silent now, but ancient spaces rarely feel empty. The ground remembers footsteps. The stones remember voices. The smoke of sacrifices once rose into this same sky. Historians continue to study how Hera's worship developed and changed across regions. Her importance at Argos, Samos, and other locations suggests that she was not simply a character created to complete Zeus's story. She had her own religious life, her own sacred places, her own worshippers. This changes how you understand the marriage. If Hera already possessed enormous authority, then becoming Zeus's wife was not the beginning of her importance. It was a relationship between two established powers, the king of heaven and the queen of heaven, the storm and the household, the ruler and the institution that gives rulership continuity. You travel next across the sea towards Samos. The island rises from the blue waters of the Aegean, covered with green hills and valleys. The journey itself feels appropriate. Hera's worship was connected with islands, coastlines, and places where sailors crossed between worlds. The sea has always carried stories. Ships carried merchants, warriors, pilgrims, and poets. With them travelled the names of gods. At Samos stood another major sanctuary of Hera. Later traditions connected the island strongly with the goddess, preserving stories about her birth and sacred marriage. Imagine approaching the sanctuary at dawn. The first light touches the columns. The sound of waves reaches the shore below. The smell of salt mixes with incense from the altar. People gather not because Hera is flawless, but because she represents something they need: stability, recognition, the hope that relationships can survive uncertainty. This is where the ancient meaning of her marriage with Zeus becomes clearer. The Greeks were not necessarily saying, "This is a perfect marriage." They were showing something more realistic. A marriage can contain conflict and still remain central. A household can experience tension and still continue. A society can recognize the importance of order while knowing that disorder always exists. The gods reflected the world humans experienced. The divine household was not peaceful because life itself was not always peaceful. But Hera's role gives marriage a sacred dimension. A wedding was not merely a social arrangement. It connected families. It created obligations. It marked a transition between stages of life. To invoke Hera was to acknowledge that these bonds mattered. You return in imagination to Olympus. Now the throne beside Zeus looks different. Not because the conflicts disappear. They do not. But because you understand why Hera remains. She is not simply trapped. She is also central. Her authority comes from the very institution her marriage represents. Without Hera, Zeus would still possess power, but he would lack the symbolic completeness of the divine royal household. The queen gives shape to the kingdom. One evening, as the sun disappears behind the mountains, a strange sign appears at a sanctuary. The sacrificial flame burns steadily, then suddenly bends in two directions. One flame rises high, the other remains low. The priests watch silently. Perhaps it represents Zeus and Hera. Perhaps it represents conflict and unity. Perhaps it means something entirely different. Ancient signs were rarely simple messages. They invited interpretation, and that uncertainty mirrors the marriage itself. Two powers, two personalities, two forms of authority, always connected, never completely identical. Modern scholars continue to debate how much the myths of Hera preserve older religious traditions. Some believe her worship may contain elements from a very ancient goddess tradition that existed before the fully developed Olympian family became dominant. Others emphasize how Greek poets shaped her identity through her relationship with Zeus. The truth may contain both. A goddess can change through storytelling while remaining ancient through worship. That may be why Hera survives so strongly. She is not only a character in a myth, she's a memory carried through temples, rituals, and generations of human hopes. The night grows quiet. The sanctuary empties. The last smoke from the altar rises into the dark sky. Above you, the stars appear one by one, somewhere beyond the mountains. Zeus's thunder rolls softly. But here, beside Hera's sacred stones, the sound does not feel like a command. It feels like a reminder. The King of Heaven may rule the storms, but the Queen of Heaven remains where generations of worshippers placed her. At the center of marriage, at the center of memory, at the center of the ancient world she helped define. You leave the quiet stones of Hera's sanctuaries and return to the living world of ancient Greece, where the marriage of Zeus and Hera was not only remembered through stories, but also reflected through rituals, festivals, and sacred traditions. The morning begins beside the sea. A small harbour wakes beneath a soft blue sky. Fishermen pull wooden boats toward the shore. Ropes creak against weathered posts. The scent of salt water mixes with smoke rising from household fires. Merchants prepare their goods, while travellers begin walking toward roads that connect villages, temples, and distant cities. For these people, the gods are not distant figures living only inside poems. They are present through ritual, through songs, through festivals, through repeated acts that connect human life with divine patterns. And among those patterns, the sacred marriage of Zeus and Hera holds a special place. The ancient Greeks had a concept often described as the hieros gamos, the sacred marriage. It represented the union of divine powers that brought fertility, order, and renewal into the world. The idea appears in different cultures throughout the ancient Mediterranean, and in Greek traditions it became connected with several divine unions, including Zeus and Hera. But the meaning is deeper than a wedding ceremony. It is a symbol, a bridge between heaven and earth. You walk toward a sanctuary where preparations are beginning. Garlands of flowers decorate the entrance. Fresh branches of olive and laurel hang from stone pillars. The air carries the scent of wine, grain, and incense. People gather not simply to celebrate two gods as husband and wife, but to renew the idea that the world itself remains connected. Sky and earth, male and female, authority and continuity, the divine household and the human household. This helps explain one of the great mysteries of Zeus and Hera. Why would a marriage filled with conflict become such an important symbol of order? Because Greek mythology often explores ideals through imperfect examples. The gods are not models of human behavior in every detail. They are mirrors. They reflect the forces that shape existence. Marriage is powerful because it can create harmony. It is also difficult because two independent beings must share a life. The mythology of Zeus and Hera contains both truths. You imagine the sacred ceremony beginning. Music rises. Voices call upon the gods. The fire on the altar burns brightly. A procession moves toward the temple. The bride figure is honored. The king figure is recognized. The community witnesses the union. For ancient Greeks, public recognition mattered. A marriage hidden from society lacked the same power as one acknowledged by family, witnesses, and tradition. This idea appears strongly in Hera's mythology. She is not merely Zeus's companion, she is his recognized queen. Her position depends on visibility. The entire cosmos must know who stands beside the ruler of heaven. Perhaps this is why Zeus's betrayals wound her so deeply. They are not hidden private failures. They threaten the public meaning of the divine marriage. A king can have power alone, but a king with a queen represents a complete household. You return to the wedding of Zeus and Hera in imagination. The golden apples from earlier traditions shine among sacred branches. The fires burn, the gods gather. Yet now you notice something different. The wedding is not only about the beginning, it is also about repetition. Every year, every generation, every marriage ceremony performed by mortals carries an echo of the ancient union. A young couple standing before their community participates in something older than themselves. They create continuity. They promise a future. They accept responsibility. In this sense, Hera's marriage with Zeus remains meaningful even though the myth contains betrayal and suffering. The sacred ideal survives the imperfect reality. This may have been one reason ancient audiences continued telling the story. They were not seeking a simple romance. They were exploring questions they recognized. How can order exist when individuals are flawed? How can loyalty survive when desire creates conflict? How can a household remain together despite disagreement? The gods offered no easy answers. They offered images. A distant thunderstorm gathers over the mountains as the festival continues. The clouds darken briefly. People look upward. For ancient observers, unusual weather could carry divine meaning. A sudden storm during a ceremony might be seen as a warning, or a blessing. The same sign could contain opposite possibilities. Greek religion often lived in that uncertainty. The gods were powerful, but they were not predictable. The thunder fades. Rain does not come. The clouds move away. The celebration continues. This moment recalls an earlier warning from the beginning of Zeus and Hera's story, the storm beneath which Zeus approached Hera, the cuckoo hidden among the rain, the moment when trust and deception first became connected. Now storms surround their marriage again. But this time, the community stands beneath the sky. The sacred union has become larger than the two individuals involved. It belongs to everyone who looks upward and seeks meaning in the movements of heaven. Some historians believe rituals connected with sacred marriage may have helped communities express ideas of fertility, kingship, and political legitimacy. A ruler's relationship with divine order could be symbolically strengthened through connection with sacred traditions, but exactly how these rituals functioned in every location remains uncertain. Ancient Greece was never one single culture. Each city had its own customs. Each sanctuary preserved its own memories. Each community interpreted the gods through its own experience. Still, the image of Zeus and Hera remained powerful. The king and queen, the storm and the household, the ruler and the bond that gives rulership meaning. As evening approaches, the festival ends. Torches move slowly through the streets. The last songs fade. People return home beneath a sky filled with stars. A bride and groom walk together toward their new household, carrying hopes and fears that would be familiar thousands of years later. Perhaps one of them quietly whispers Hera's name, not because Hera's marriage is perfect, but because perfection was never the point. The goddess understands difficulty. She understands commitment. She understands the weight of remaining when leaving would be easier, and far above, on Olympus, Zeus and Hera still sit upon their paired thrones, still arguing, still connected, still representing the impossible balance between conflict and unity. The sacred fire burns through the night. The marriage continues. You walk away from the familiar halls of Olympus and enter a deeper layer of the story, a place where the boundaries between myth, religion, memory, and history become softer. The night is quiet. A thin mist settles over the valleys of Greece. Moonlight touches ancient stones that have survived long after the voices of the people who built them disappeared. Olive trees move slowly in the wind. The sea beyond the hills reflects the stars like scattered silver. Here, you begin to ask a different question. What if the marriage of Zeus and Hera was not only a story about two gods? What if it was also a memory of older traditions meeting together? Ancient Greece was not born as a single unified religious world. The gods worshipped by later generations developed over centuries. Stories changed as they travelled. Local traditions merged. Poets arranged genealogies. Communities connected their own sacred places to the wider divine family. The Zeus who ruled Olympus in classical poetry was shaped by a long history of belief. And Hera's story may be even older. You return in imagination to her sanctuaries, Argos, Samos, places where people honoured Hera not simply as the wife of Zeus, but as a goddess with her own sacred power. The stones tell a quiet story. Before poets described every relationship among the Olympians, worshippers were already bringing offerings to powerful female deities connected with protection, fertility, kingship, and community. Archaeological discoveries from ancient sanctuaries reveal long traditions of worship that cannot always be perfectly matched with later myths. A small bronze offering, a carved object, a fragment of pottery, a foundation stone. Each piece suggests a human connection to the divine. Someone stood here. Someone prayed here. Someone believed this place mattered. The evidence does not tell you exactly what those people imagined. That mystery remains. Historians continue to debate how much of Hera's mythology developed alongside her worship, and how much was later shaped by poets who organized the gods into a family centered around Zeus. Perhaps Hera was always imagined beside Zeus. Perhaps the marriage gradually became a way of explaining the relationship between different religious traditions. Perhaps both ideas contain part of the truth. Ancient religion rarely moves in straight lines. It grows like an olive tree. New branches appear, but the older roots remain beneath the ground. You can see this when you consider the symbolism of Zeus and Hera. Zeus is the sky, the thunder, the authority above. Hera is connected with marriage, queenship, and the ordered household. Together they create a cosmic image. The sky above, the human community below, the forces that govern both nature and society. Perhaps the marriage became powerful because it joined things that humans experienced as separate but necessary: power and stability, authority and tradition, the individual ruler and the institution surrounding him. This does not mean the Greeks saw Zeus and Hera as a peaceful couple. They did not. The stories of their arguments were too important, but perhaps the tension itself carried meaning. The world is not held together because conflict disappears. It is held together because forces in conflict continue to exist within a larger order. You can see this idea throughout Greek mythology. Poseidon shakes the earth, but the sea still supports life. Hades rules the dead, but agriculture depends on the cycle of loss and return. Ares represents violence, but courage in battle remains necessary. The gods are not simple symbols of good and evil. They are parts of reality. And Zeus and Hera represent perhaps the most human reality of all. The struggle of living together. One evening, you imagine standing in a sanctuary dedicated to Hera. The temple is empty. The last visitors have gone. A priest has extinguished the main fire, leaving only a faint glow among the ashes. Then a strange thing happens. A sudden wind passes through the temple. The ashes rise briefly. For a moment. Two small streams of smoke move in opposite directions. Then they join again and disappear into the night. An ancient worshipper might have seen this as a sign. Two paths, two powers, one connection. But what does it truly mean? No one can know. The gods speak through symbols, and symbols rarely have only one meaning. This uncertainty is part of why myths survive. They leave room for each generation to ask new questions. Modern researchers also look beyond literary sources. They study temple architecture, inscriptions, ritual objects, and the geographical spread of worship to understand how ancient Greeks experienced their gods. The evidence suggests that religion was not simply a collection of stories. It was lived. People walked to sanctuaries. They carried offerings. They celebrated festivals. They built communities around sacred places. For them, Hera was not only the angry wife from poetry, she was a presence, a goddess who belonged to the landscape, a protector whose name could be spoken during important moments of life. This changes the way you see her marriage. Perhaps Zeus did not create Hera's importance. Perhaps their marriage placed two already powerful traditions into a shared cosmic story. The king of the sky needed a queen, but the queen existed before the crown. You return once more to Olympus. The palace stands above the clouds. Zeus sits beneath the thunder-filled sky. Hera sits beside him. The old prophecy of Cronus has faded into memory. The war against the Titans has become legend. The wedding has become sacred tradition. The conflicts have become stories told beside fires. Yet the question remains, why did Zeus marry his own sister? The answer is not only because they shared blood, not only because mythology allowed divine families to follow different rules, not only because ancient storytellers wanted a royal couple. Perhaps Zeus married Hera because Olympus required a queen whose power could stand beside his own. Perhaps Hera married Zeus because their destinies had been connected since the moment Cronus swallowed them both. Perhaps their union represents something older than either of them, the ancient human desire to believe that even a chaotic universe can find balance. The stars move slowly above the mountains. The sea breathes beneath the moon, and somewhere between history and legend, between temple stones and whispered stories, the marriage of Zeus and Hera continues, not as a perfect union, but as an eternal question. You return once more to Olympus, but this time you do not enter as a visitor searching for stories of romance or betrayal. You enter as someone trying to understand power. The palace stands above the clouds, silent beneath a sky filled with stars. Marble columns rise into the darkness. Sacred fires burn in golden vessels. The scent of cedar and incense drifts through the halls, and beyond the terraces the distant sea reflects the light of the moon. Here, Zeus and Hera sit upon their thrones, king and queen, brother and sister, two descendants of the same ancient line. And now the meaning of their marriage becomes clearer. The wedding was not only about affection, it was also about succession, about inheritance, about the question every royal household must answer. Who has the right to rule? In Greek mythology, bloodline carries enormous importance. The gods are organized through generations. Uranus gives way to Cronus. Cronus gives way to Zeus. Each ruler belongs to a new generation, and each transition reshapes the universe. The overthrow of one ruler by another is not a random event. It is built into the structure of the myth. You remember the prophecy that haunted Cronus. A child would replace him. He tried to prevent it by destroying his own children, but his attempt only ensured his downfall. Zeus learned from this. He did not destroy his siblings. He freed them. He built alliances. He created a new order. Yet the fear of succession never completely disappears. A king must always think about the future, and marriage is part of that future. In the ancient world, royal marriages often carried political meaning. They could unite families, strengthen claims, and create legitimate heirs. The gods exaggerate these human concerns. A divine marriage does not simply connect two people. It connects cosmic powers. When Zeus marries Hera, he does not choose a goddess from outside the ruling generation. He chooses someone who shares his ancestry, someone who possesses the same claim to divine authority, someone whose presence confirms that the house of Cronus and Rhea remains at the center of creation. Imagine a mortal king standing in a palace courtyard. Around him are nobles, warriors, priests, and family members. His power does not exist alone. It depends on relationships, on ancestry, on recognition, on tradition. Ancient Greeks understood this deeply. Communities remembered heroes through family lines. Kings traced descent from legendary ancestors. Cities connected themselves with divine founders. Genealogy was not merely a record of births. It was a statement of identity. The gods follow the same logic. Zeus and Hera are not ordinary spouses. They are the continuation of a divine dynasty. Yet there is a strange tension. The very closeness that strengthens their claim also creates danger. You have already seen how divine families in Greek mythology are filled with rivalry. Children challenge parents. Siblings compete. Spouses deceive each other. The family is both the source of stability and the source of conflict. This is why the marriage of Zeus and Hera feels so powerful. It contains the entire pattern of Greek mythology: unity and division, love and rivalry, order and chaos. Perhaps ancient storytellers understood that the family was never simple. The same people who provide belonging can also create the deepest wounds. You walk through the halls of Olympus and notice something. The palace is full of relationships. Athena stands as Zeus's daughter and advisor. Apollo and Artemis represent another branch of Zeus's divine descendants. Ares belongs to Zeus and Hera. Hephaestus carries the complicated memory of their conflict. Each god represents another connection, another alliance, another tension. The Olympian household is not merely a group of individuals, it is a network of power. And at the center are Zeus and Hera. A prophecy appears in the imagination of an ancient storyteller, not written on stone, not spoken by an oracle, but carried through a dream. A young priest sleeps beside a temple fire and sees Olympus surrounded by two circles of light. One circle belongs to Zeus, one belongs to Hera. The circles move apart, then slowly return. When the priest awakens, he wonders whether the vision means conflict or harmony. Perhaps both, because Greek mythology often refuses to separate the two. A kingdom is not strong because everyone agrees. A kingdom is strong because disagreements do not destroy it. This idea may explain why Zeus and Hera remain together through endless conflict. Their separation would represent more than personal failure. It would represent the collapse of a symbolic balance. The king without the queen, the sky without the household, authority without legitimacy. Of course, mythology does not present Hera as equal to Zeus in every way. Zeus remains the supreme ruler. His decisions often determine the direction of divine events. But Hera's power exists in another form. She represents something Zeus cannot simply command: recognition, the sacred bond that transforms a ruler into part of a tradition. A king may seize power, a dynasty must be accepted, and Hera gives Zeus something even the thunderbolt cannot create: a legitimate household. As dawn approaches, the clouds below Olympus begin glowing with the first light. The palace slowly awakens. The gods move through the halls. The fires are renewed. The world begins again. Zeus looks toward the heavens. Hera looks toward the earth below. One rules the vastness above. One guards the structures that hold life together. Perhaps this is why their marriage endured in memory for thousands of years. Not because it was peaceful, not because it was simple, but because it represented the difficult balance every society understands. Power needs responsibility. Authority needs tradition. A ruler needs something beyond strength. The story of Zeus and Hera began with a strange question. Why would Zeus marry his own sister? Now you see that the ancient answer was larger than romance. He married Hera because she belonged to the same divine bloodline that created Olympus, because she carried the authority of an ancient goddess, because the king of heaven needed a queen whose existence confirmed the order he claimed to rule. Yet even after understanding this, one mystery remains. If Hera was so essential to Zeus's kingship, why did their marriage become filled with so much pain? Perhaps the answer lies not in what they shared, but in what they could never fully overcome. Their different visions of power, and that difference will carry them toward the final chapters of their ancient story. You return to the quietest question surrounding Zeus and Hera, not why they married. You have followed that path through prophecy, bloodline, worship, and cosmic order. The deeper mystery is this: why did Hera remain? Why did the goddess who possessed such pride, such authority, and such power continue beside a husband who repeatedly challenged everything she represented? The answer lies somewhere between destiny and identity. Night settles over Olympus. The palace is peaceful for once. No rebellion, no thunder, no arguments echoing through the marble halls. The sacred fires burn softly, casting warm light across the stone. Outside, the mountain wind moves through the columns, far below. The Aegean glimmers beneath the stars. Hera walks alone. Perhaps she remembers another time when she walked alone. Before the wedding. Before the throne. Before becoming queen, she remembers herself as the daughter of Rhea and Cronus. a goddess who survived the darkness of her father's fear. She remembers the moment Zeus freed her. She remembers the war against the Titans. She remembers the sacred fire of the wedding ceremony. She remembers every promise, whether spoken aloud or simply created through the expectations of divine order. And perhaps she understands something painful. She didn't only marry Zeus. She became Hera because of Zeus. Their identities became connected. This is one reason leaving him is not simple. The mythology of ancient Greece rarely treats gods as individuals separated from their roles. They embody forces larger than themselves. Hera is not merely a woman with a difficult husband. She is marriage, queenship, the recognized bond between households. If she abandoned Zeus completely, what would happen to the very institution she protects? The question creates a powerful contradiction. The goddess of marriage is bound to a marriage that causes her suffering. But perhaps ancient audiences recognized this contradiction because human life contained similar struggles. Marriage was not always easy. Families were not always peaceful. Promises could be tested. People remained together because of duty, children, reputation, love, necessity, or belief. The gods magnified these human experiences. They did not remove them. You walk through a mortal village at night. The scene is simple. A small house of stone and clay, a fire burning in the center, the smell of bread and olive oil filling the room, a family sitting together after a long day. Outside, the stars shine above the roof. Perhaps someone inside has argued with a spouse. Perhaps someone worries about tomorrow. Perhaps someone quietly wonders whether their household can endure. To that person, Hera is not only the perfect bride, she is the goddess who knows difficulty. The goddess who understands that relationships are complicated. This does not make every action attributed to Hera acceptable. The myths sometimes show her causing suffering to those who do not deserve it. Ancient storytellers were not always trying to create moral examples. They were exploring powerful emotions pushed beyond human limits. Jealousy becomes divine. Anger becomes cosmic. Pride becomes unstoppable. But beneath all of it remains a question. How do powerful beings live together? The answer Greek mythology offers is not always comforting. Sometimes they fight. Sometimes they hurt each other. But sometimes they continue. That continuation itself becomes meaningful. You remember the rebellion against Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Athena, and others once attempted to remove him from power. They failed. Afterward, Zeus punished Hera, yet he did not replace her. He did not choose another queen. He did not erase the marriage. The throne beside him remained hers. That detail matters. The relationship survives because it represents something greater than affection. A divine order is formed around their union. One evening, Hera stands beside the palace terrace. A storm approaches from the west. Dark clouds gather above the sea. Lightning appears silently inside the distance. She hears the thunder before it reaches Olympus. The sound reminds her of Zeus. Perhaps once, that sound represented only power. Now it represents something more complicated. The person who wounded her. The ruler she challenged. The brother who freed her. The husband beside whom she sits. A dream comes to Hera that night. She sees Olympus covered in snow. The palace is empty. The throne of Zeus stands untouched. The throne of Hera stands untouched. Between them lies a narrow path covered with flowers. She walks toward Zeus's throne. The flowers become stones. She turns toward her own throne. The stones become flowers. When she wakes, she cannot understand whether the dream was a warning or a promise. Would leaving Zeus bring freedom but destroy the order she represents? Would staying preserve the cosmos but require endless endurance? No ancient poet gives a final answer. Perhaps that is why the story remains powerful, because there is no simple solution. Hera stays because she is queen. She stays because she's goddess of marriage. She stays because destiny placed her beside Zeus before either of them fully understood the cost. She stays because the mythology itself needs them together. Two forces constantly pulling against each other, yet never completely separating. As centuries pass, poets will remember their arguments. Artists will carve their images. Worshippers will continue bringing offerings. The marriage will become older than kingdoms, older than temples, older than the languages used to tell it. And perhaps Hera's greatest strength is not that she never suffers. It is that suffering does not erase her. She remains. The queen remains. The goddess remains. The stars above Olympus slowly fade as morning approaches. Zeus wakes. Hera returns to the throne beside him. Another day begins. Another cycle. Another moment in the endless story of heaven. But soon you must look beyond the palace walls once more, because the final meaning of their marriage is not found only in their conflicts. It is found in what their union represented to the people who remembered them. A world where fate, power, love, and suffering could exist together beneath the same sky. You return once again to the highest halls of Olympus. But now you look at Zeus from a different perspective. For so long, the story has followed Hera. Her pain, her anger, her dignity, her endurance. But now you turn toward the king himself and ask a quieter question. Why did Zeus need Hera? After all, Zeus possessed nearly everything a ruler could desire. He held the thunderbolt. He commanded the sky. He defeated the Titans. He escaped the fate of Cronus. He controlled the divine assembly. Why would the most powerful god in Greek mythology require anyone beside him? The answer is hidden in something power alone cannot provide: recognition. The palace is silent beneath the evening sky. The clouds below Olympus glow with the last light of the sun. Marble columns shine softly. The sound of distant thunder moves across the horizon, not as a threat, but as a reminder of the authority Zeus carries. Yet a throne by itself is incomplete. A ruler may conquer, a ruler may command, but a kingdom requires more than strength. It requires order. You have seen this from the beginning. Cronus possessed power, but he had no trust. He ruled through fear. His household collapsed because he believed control could replace harmony. Zeus learned from that failure. His kingdom required relationships. The marriage with Hera becomes one of the foundations of that kingdom. She gives his rule a dimension thunder cannot create. A storm can frighten. A law can command. But a household creates continuity. In ancient Greek thought, the household was one of the central structures of society. The home was not simply a private place. It was connected to inheritance, worship, family identity, and social order. The divine household of Olympus reflects this idea. Zeus is the ruler. Hera makes the ruling household complete. Without her, Zeus remains a conqueror. With her, he becomes the head of a cosmic dynasty. You can imagine a mortal king standing in a palace courtyard. His soldiers surround him. His wealth is visible. His enemies have been defeated, yet without a recognized lineage, without traditions connecting him to the past and future. His authority remains fragile. The Greeks understood this. Kingship was not only about winning, it was about belonging. Zeus belongs to the generation that replaced the Titans. Hera confirms that connection. She is the daughter of Cronus and Rhea. She's not a servant who entered Zeus's palace. She's part of the same royal bloodline. Her presence tells the universe that the new order is not built by Zeus alone. It is built by the surviving children of the old order. This may also explain why Zeus never replaces her despite their conflicts. Many stories describe Zeus with other partners. Many children are born outside the marriage. But Hera remains queen, because those other relationships may expand Zeus's family. Only Hera defines his throne. This distinction is subtle, but ancient audiences would have understood it. A king may have many connections, but the queen represents the official center. She represents legitimacy. She represents continuity. You return to the image of Olympus during a divine gathering. The gods assemble. Athena stands near Zeus. Apollo and Artemis arrive. Poseidon enters from the sea. Hermes moves quickly between worlds. Each god carries a different power. But beside Zeus stands Hera, not because she is the strongest, not because she controls the thunder, but because her presence completes the image of divine rule. A strange omen appears during the gathering. An eagle circles above Olympus. The bird associated with Zeus rises higher and higher until it disappears into the sun. Then unexpectedly another bird follows. A peacock spreads its feathers beneath the mountain terrace. The two creatures stand apart. One represents the king, one represents the queen. Then they turn in the same direction. Ancient observers might have interpreted such a sight as a sign of harmony, or perhaps a reminder that two different powers can share the same path without becoming identical. Of course, this is symbolic rather than a recorded ancient omen, but it reflects the question at the center of Zeus and Hera. How can two powerful beings remain together? Not by becoming the same, by remaining connected despite difference. This may be the deepest meaning of their marriage. Zeus needs Hera because he represents the force of command. Hera represents the force that gives command a place within society. Zeus rules the heavens. Hera gives the heavens a household. Zeus creates order through authority. Hera preserves order through relationship. Neither replaces the other. At least that is the ideal. The myths complicate it. They show Zeus failing the standards Hera represents. They show Hera reacting with anger that sometimes harms others. They show that even divine order remains imperfect. But perhaps this imperfection is exactly why the story endured. Ancient Greeks were not imagining a world without conflict. They were imagining how conflict could exist without destroying everything. The marriage of Zeus and Hera becomes a cosmic version of that question. Can power and responsibility coexist? Can freedom exist alongside commitment? Can two strong wills share one throne? The answer of mythology is complicated. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, always imperfectly. Night settles over Olympus. The sacred fires burn. The stars appear above the mountain. Zeus looks across his kingdom. Hera sits beside him. The king of heaven and the queen of heaven. Brother and sister, husband and wife, opponents and partners. Their story began with a strange question about why Zeus would marry his own sister. Now the answer has become larger. He didn't marry Hera only because they shared blood. He married her because the universe he ruled required a queen, because power needed legitimacy, because victory needed tradition, because even the greatest ruler needs someone whose presence gives meaning to the world he has created. And perhaps, somewhere beneath the myths, there is a human truth. No person rules alone. No kingdom survives without relationships. No power exists without something that gives it purpose. The thunder may belong to Zeus, but the throne beside him belongs to Hera, and Olympus would never be the same without her. You return to Olympus one final time before the story begins its slow descent toward memory. The mountain is quiet. The storms have passed. The halls that once echoed with arguments now rest beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The marble floors hold the warmth of the day, while cool night air moves through the open columns. The scent of sacred fire drifts through the palace, mixing with the distant smell of rain carried from the mountains. Here, you see Zeus and Hera not only as husband and wife. You see them as symbols of the world the ancient Greeks imagined. A world where opposing forces could exist together, where order could contain conflict, where harmony did not mean the absence of struggle. It meant endurance. You have followed their story from the beginning. You saw them as children of Cronus and Rhea, swallowed into darkness by a father terrified of prophecy. You saw Zeus hidden in a Cretan cave while Hera remained imprisoned. You saw the Titanomachy, when a younger generation challenged the old. You saw their wedding beneath sacred fires. You saw the arguments, betrayals, rebellions, and reconciliations. And now, standing beneath the stars of Olympus, you can see the larger pattern. Their marriage reflects the entire structure of Greek mythology. Nothing remains completely separate. Creation and destruction, love and rivalry, fate and choice. The gods themselves are built from contradictions. Zeus is the god of order, but his own life creates disorder. Hera is the goddess of marriage, but her own marriage is filled with suffering. The king who protects justice does not always act justly. The queen who protects union cannot always preserve peace. Yet the universe continues. That is the mystery ancient Greek storytellers return to again and again. The world is not perfect. The world is not simple, but somehow it remains. You walk along the edge of Olympus and look downward. Below the clouds are the lands of Greece, the islands scattered across the blue sea, the mountains where shepherds move beneath the stars, the cities where temples rise beside marketplaces, the villages where families gather around evening fires, All of these places contain the same reality. People love, people argue, people forgive, people remember. The gods are larger than humans, but their stories are filled with human emotions. Perhaps that is why Zeus and Hera remained so memorable. Their marriage is not a story of perfection, it is a story of persistence. A sacred bond that survives because it has become part of the structure of the world. Ancient Greeks did not need their gods to behave like ordinary people. They needed their gods to explain extraordinary experiences. Marriage was powerful because it created both joy and obligation. Family was meaningful because it created both belonging and conflict. Power was valuable because it created both security and danger. Zeus and Hera carry all of these ideas together. A final mystery remains. Did ancient Greeks truly see Zeus and Hera as a loving couple? Or did they see them as a necessary cosmic pair whose relationship represented something beyond emotion? The surviving traditions do not provide one answer. Some stories emphasize desire, some emphasize conflict, some emphasize ritual and sacred order. Perhaps all of them survived because each revealed something different. One evening, as darkness covers the mountain, you imagine Hera standing beside the altar where their wedding fire once burned. The flame is smaller now, not extinguished, only quieter. She places her hand near the warmth, and perhaps she remembers everything. The first moment Zeus approached her as a cuckoo beneath the storm, the day she became queen, the children they shared, the betrayals she endured, the rebellion she attempted, the endless cycle of anger and reconciliation. Then she looks toward the horizon. Thunder sounds softly, not close, not threatening, just present. A reminder that Zeus remains, a reminder that she remains too. A prophecy appears in the dream of an ancient storyteller. The storyteller sees Olympus surrounded by darkness. One throne stands empty. One throne remains occupied. The storyteller walks closer and discovers that the empty throne is not abandoned. It is waiting, waiting for the next generation, waiting for memory, waiting for the stories that will continue after gods and humans are gone. The storyteller wakes. The meaning is unclear. Perhaps it speaks of succession. Perhaps it speaks of mortality. Perhaps it simply reminds us that every kingdom, even Olympus, exists inside time. Because this is another important truth hidden within Greek mythology. Even immortal stories are shaped by change. Temples fall. Cities disappear. Languages transform. The people who first whispered these myths beside ancient fires are gone. Yet Zeus and Hera remain, not because they were perfect, because they represented questions that never disappeared. How should power be used? How can relationships survive conflict? Why do people remain connected even when they hurt each other? These questions belong not only to gods, they belong to everyone who has ever lived. The night grows deeper. The wind moves through the cypress trees. The stars continue their slow journey across the sky. And Olympus becomes quiet. The king and queen remain beside each other, not as a perfect couple, not as a simple love story, but as two eternal forces sharing one universe. Perhaps that is why the ancient Greeks placed them together, because the world itself is built from opposing things. The sea is calm and violent. The sky is bright and storm-filled. Life contains both happiness and sorrow. And somehow, beneath all of it, there is still balance. The marriage of Zeus and Hera was never only about why a god married his sister. It was about why the universe requires different forces to exist together. It was about power and restraint, freedom and obligation, memory and fate. And as the last torches of Olympus fade into the night, their story remains exactly where it began, beneath the same stars, within the same endless sky. You return to the mountain one final time. The path is quiet now. No armies march across the valleys. No titans rise against the heavens. No thunder shakes the foundations of the world. Only the gentle sounds of night remain. The wind moves through olive branches. The sea breathes against distant shores. A small sacred fire burns beside ancient stones, its golden light rising and falling with the rhythm of the evening air. Above you stands Olympus, the home of the gods, the place where stories of kings and queens, victories and betrayals, promises and regrets have been remembered for thousands of years. And at the center of that mountain, Zeus and Hera remain. Their story began with a question that seems impossible. Why would Zeus marry his own sister? But after walking through their world, the answer has become more complicated than a single explanation. It was about bloodline. It was about power. It was about the ancient belief that the universe itself was organized through divine relationships. It was about a king who needed more than strength, and a queen whose authority existed long before she ever sat beside him. But perhaps, more than anything, it was about fate. The Greeks understood fate as something vast, something older than individual desire. Even the greatest gods moved within patterns they did not fully control. Cronus tried to escape prophecy and created the very future he feared. Zeus escaped his father's fate but inherited his father's anxiety. Hera gained the highest position among goddesses, but discovered that even a queen could not command everything within her own household. Their lives followed paths that seemed chosen before they understood them, and perhaps that is why their marriage remained so powerful in memory. Not because it was peaceful, because it was permanent. The ancient Greeks knew that human life was filled with things that could not be perfectly resolved. A family could carry love and resentment at the same time. A promise could be meaningful even when it became difficult. A person could be wounded and still remain connected. The gods reflected those truths on a larger scale. You imagine Hera standing beside her throne one last time. The palace is almost empty. The other gods have departed into their own realms. Apollo's music has faded. Poseidon's waves are distant. Athena's footsteps have disappeared into the marble halls. Only the queen remains beneath the stars. Perhaps she thinks about the beginning, the darkness inside Cronus, the fear of a father who wanted to stop time, the child Zeus hidden on Crete, the moment when the swallowed children returned. Perhaps she remembers the first time she saw her brother as something more than family. The future king, the one who would change everything. Perhaps she remembers the wedding fire, the sacred vows, the golden light, the hopes of a new divine order. Perhaps she remembers the pain as well, the lovers, the betrayals, the arguments, the moments when the throne beside her felt less like an honor and more like a burden. But memory in Greek mythology is never only about suffering. Memory preserves everything. The beautiful moments remain beside the painful ones. And that is another reason Hera endures. She's not remembered only because Zeus hurt her. She is remembered because she refused to disappear. The goddess who represented marriage became a symbol of endurance. The queen who faced humiliation remained queen. The divine woman who experienced conflict remained part of the order she helped create. And Zeus, the thunder fades. The great ruler of the sky is remembered not only for his power. He is remembered because his power was never enough by itself. He needed alliances. He needed family. He needed traditions. He needed someone beside him who represented something beyond command. He needed Hera. The final mystery remains. Did Zeus and Hera truly love one another? Ancient stories do not give you a simple answer. Perhaps love existed. Perhaps duty existed. Perhaps destiny existed. Perhaps the Greeks understood that the strongest bonds are not always the easiest ones. Some connections survive because they are effortless. Others survive because they become part of who we are. Their marriage became part of the universe they ruled. And so, even after the temples fell, after the languages changed, after the voices of ancient storytellers disappeared into time, the story remained. Tonight, beneath the same stars that watched over ancient Greece, you can still imagine Olympus above the clouds. You can still hear distant thunder. You can still smell the sacred fire. You can still see the marble halls glowing softly in the darkness. And there, at the center of the divine palace, sit two figures, Zeus, Hera. Not perfect, not simple, but unforgettable. Their story is a reminder that every age asks the same questions. What binds people together? What survives conflict? What remains after time has taken everything else away? The Greeks answered through myths. They placed those questions among gods and mountains, storms and temples, oceans and stars. But the answers were always about humanity, about memory, about fate, about the fragile connections that shape a life. The fire beside you grows smaller. The wind becomes softer. The mountain becomes quiet. The stars above Olympus continue their endless journey across the sky, and slowly, the ancient world begins to fade into darkness. The voices of poets become whispers, the footsteps of worshippers become echoes, the marble temples become memories, but the story remains, the story of a king who ruled the heavens, the story of a queen who carried the weight of marriage and dignity, the story of Zeus and Hera, two beings joined by blood, bound by fate, remembered through time, and as the night deepens, you leave the mountain path behind. The sea continues its gentle rhythm, the stars continue to shine, the ancient gods return to silence, and beneath the peaceful sky, the story finally rests,